What is up? There's already people here. That rules. I'm just arranging the windows so I can see everything. I got OBS. I'm going to try and do manual focus stuff this time. See how that goes. How you guys doing? I'm stoked there's people here already. Yo, nice. I've been looking forward to this all day also, actually. It's like the anchor of my early week. It actually is, though. Okay, 1 second. I have to actually go onto YouTube and find my own stream this time. Use that to copy and paste the link onto Twitter. So I like to just give people a minute to come in. I don't like to make people that are on time wait too long, but we'll kick it for 1 second and then we'll get this going. I'm posting this on Twitter and I see that Donald Trump posted the video of Mike Bloomberg licking his fingers after eating pizza, and honestly, it's fucking hilarious. Alright, I've posted the link on Twitter. It is posted. Okay, let's see. How can I get... Yo, great questions already. Yeah, let's let people get in here. We can talk for a second, and then I'll get this going. Let's see. What's the best way for me to look at the chat? I think I'm going to just leave the YouTube thing open. How was my weekend? My weekend was pretty tight, man. Honestly, I'm really trying to get the graphics and illustration thing off the ground, so unless I have like life stuff I have to do, I'm just in the studio all the time, just doing graphics and drawing, and I'm really trying to get it off the ground. So that's like literally all I do, unless I have to like go to the doctor, or unless my wife has like something going on that I don't want to say need to go to, because I like doing stuff with her, but otherwise, man, I just work all the time. So that's cool, actually. It's cool. I like it's kind of a fun time for me. Vatican Museum. Dude, I don't know why you asked me that, but I was talking about the Vatican Museum with someone else today, and it's one of the best museums in the world. It's fucking insane. The art there is completely absurd. Also, if anyone's going to Rome, the Borghese Gallery is actually really where you got to go. The Borghese Gallery in Rome. You have to make an appointment usually. It's really awesome. But it's been 3 minutes. People are on time. People are waiting. Let's do this. We're going to get this started right now. All right, what is up, everyone? How's it going? Oh yeah, theme song, Painted Worlds. That's the house band. Check it out. I was gonna put his name there. I'm just gonna say it every time though. This is a soundbite. Painted Worlds. Check it out on Spotify, Bandcamp, everywhere you get your music from. Anyway, guys, how is it going? I'm doing really well. People were asking me how it's going. It's been an interesting time. It's been a cool time. I kind of just want to jump right in, and I basically talk about stuff while I'm working, obviously. But it's going well. We'll talk about stuff, man. Yeah, if this is your first time watching this, basically, even if it's not your first time, I'm still really figuring out how to play it while I'm talking and working. So I'm still really experimenting. I'm also, just to be completely honest, like experimenting in terms of what I want to talk about. Do I want to talk about like my real life? People ask me questions just about the art. Is it a refuge from politics here? Have you escaped the drudgery of politics under the umbrella of art, the sweet sucker of maiden painting? Or am I going to talk about that? I don't know. So we're still in experimental mode. I guess after like episode 10, maybe I'll stop saying that. But yeah, let's just do this. So I'll just keep talking. I'll start talking while I'm squaring this off right now. I also, in terms of experimenting here, every time, it's Tuesday, it's like, let's say 1, 2, 3 o'clock, and I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, man, should I like prep something? Like, should I prepare something to work on the stream? And just with like every fiber of my being, I'm resisting the idea of preparing an image beforehand. I just feel like it's so much tighter to just wing it and talk about what I'm thinking as I'm doing it. So I guess my plan kind of is that I'll keep doing that until maybe I do a stream one time and it just goes horribly. Like maybe I just completely blank and can't think of anything. And then after that, I'll plan it out. But that'll probably never happen, actually. Same deal with like what I talk about. I could like sit down beforehand and map out like bullet points or something. But I don't know. I just feel like it's more chill to just do it off the cuff. Something else I'm experimenting with in terms of the vibe is also like, I don't know, I used to do a lot of public speaking. Can't really be more specific than that, but I used to do a lot of public speaking, so I'm very aware of like all the variables I have in terms of how I'm talking to you guys, like the pacing, also my tone. So sometimes I feel like I have it up to like 99, the energy level, and I'm really just kind of aggressively like, oh my god, like there can't be any like dead air, like, oh, do you know this, like I'm talking about this, like going so hard. And sometimes I feel like that's the move. Sometimes I feel like it makes things a little tense. You can kind of feel like the like tension, I guess you could say. So I don't know, I'm experimenting with a lot of variables. Maybe this one will be more chill, but I also don't want to be like sleepy time, so I did drink a ton of coffee before doing this, so who knows how it's gonna go. All right, so I'm also thinking about what I'm going to draw right now. It's interesting because I guess I should talk about a little bit where I'm coming from before I like start doing this image. One aspect of how my brain works and how I like process information, I don't know if anyone else is this way or if it's just me. Like no one ever really talks about their like metacognition. They're like reflecting on like their own like thought processes, or people don't really talk about it too much. But I feel like what happens for me is in my mind, I'll kind of, I feel like if my mind is this cavern, I'll tunnel, I'll be tunneling really deep down, and all of a sudden I'll find this, like fake wall in the cavern, and I'll puncture through, and there's just this huge new open space for me to check out, and there's gems, and there's like paths leading off in the distance, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of space here. Like this is awesome, and I can just make like cover like a ton of ground like really quickly. But then eventually, like I hit another wall, and then that wall is like solid. You can't puncture through it, and I have to go back and find like another angle to come at it from. I have to find a new place to like start tunneling and get that momentum again. Hold on, I'm gonna drink some water right now. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I feel like how my mind works is on that note, it's like I go really, really, really hard. I'll go like 120%. On an extremely particular topic, and I'll just go as far and as hard as I can on that, and then when I hit that wall, I have to like back up and say, okay, like now I need to go, squeeze blood from like another stone. And I feel like since my wedding, I got married in December, I've just been going so hard on particular aspects of like church history, early church history, really like the papal schism, I guess, is what you could say I've been researching since like December. And I just feel like the last like 2 weeks I went to crack open like another book about it, and I was like, all right, I need to just step away for like 1 second. And oddly, I was reading about some more like political stuff, some more like sociological stuff. So yeah, I don't really know how much I'm going to talk about that, but it's just kind of an interesting note. It always translates into the images. If I'm reading about a particular time period, a particular topic, naturally that'll form the basis for the images that I'm making. There's a Rilke poem I really like. If no one's checked out Rilke yet, Rilke, it's one of my favorite poets. Actually, it's definitely my favorite poet of all time. And he says that he feels like he's an eagle circling this tower. And the tower is God in this poem. It's a really short poem. I'm gonna butcher it, but that's kind of how the metaphor goes in the poem. He's this eagle circling this tower, and the tower is God. And the circles get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter as he closes in on this tower that is God. And I always think about that with all the different topics I go through, because it seems like they're unrelated. Like 1 minute I'm hitting a book about modernity and aesthetics and how visual culture changed with television, and then the next minute I'm hitting a book about the papal schism, and the next minute I'm hitting a book about the Russian Revolution, and the next minute I'm hitting a book. And I guess you could see it all as unrelated, but for me it's like I'm closing in on this tower. I'm just closing in, getting closer and closer and closer, and really my whole life's been like that intellectually. I bridge these gaps between these topics, and I don't know, I just feel like I should kind of lead off with that in terms of the drawing I'm making right now, because I don't really know what it's going to be about, but I've been thinking about a lot of more disparate topics, I guess you could say. This guy named Benoit Mandelbrot, he's the guy that he's the guy that articulated the idea of what fractals are. He said that all disciplines, whatever they are, owe a great debt to those people that are nomadic by choice in terms of what they study. The people that bridge these gaps between different fields and aren't like for him, for example, he was a mathematician, but he wasn't really just a mathematician. He was a scientist, but also everything he did in math and science was about how it overlapped with visuals, and that involved him studying nature and the visual arts. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. Anyway, onto the art. That's the opening monologue. If it's a nighttime show, that's the opening monologue. So what am I going to get going on here color-wise? I have also been thinking, so I don't just think about pure abstract information while I'm sitting around the studio all day. Obviously there's themes that go on in terms of the art, and I have really been thinking about my color schemes a lot, and I've really just been thinking a lot about the color red. So we're going to start with that right now. This Brazilian street artist that I used to like, honestly, I totally forget his name because I was 13 or 14 when I was checking all that stuff out. So I'm going to plug his ideas, but I don't even remember his name right now. He said something really, really smart that I'm sure other artists have realized, but I only picked it up from him. He said that red is the only color that doesn't upset the natural balance between black and white. And I always thought about that. It's really interesting. If you've done any art, or even if you haven't, you can look at black and white and see that they have this natural harmony. They have this natural balance about them. And red is the only color you can insert in there that doesn't upset that kind of natural harmony. And I thought it was really interesting. If you imagine, even just in your mind right now, black and white, and then inserting different colors in there, like I said, red's the only one that keeps that natural, perfect balance between the two. So I think I'm going to start with that. I've been doing a lot of stuff with just red and black and white. I'm working on this comic right now that's just red, black, and white. Actually, I don't know if I've talked about it here yet. It's kind of about porn and sex and young men and my life and stuff like that. So I was using the color red, and red's this really sexual, almost primal color, but it's also very regal color. Red, black, and white always gives me a little bit of an Asian color scheme feel. Also, one other thing is that I'm actually going to turn the autofocus off. I have it off right now, and I just want to see how that goes. The autofocus on this camera, I got a really nice camera. At least I tried to get it going for you guys. Sometimes it'll twitch back and forth. I watched a long part of the previous broadcast, and people told me that it happened also. Is sometimes I feel like it doesn't know what to focus on, and then my hand has the brush and it's black on white on my hand, so it doesn't know if it should focus here or what. So I tuned it to focus on the paper at this depth, and I have this window over here. I can turn the autofocus on and off, so we'll see how that goes. And in terms of starting right now, I kind of want to do something that I haven't done before. That's something I talked about in the earlier streams also. I can just do stuff that I've, done like a trillion times before, but where's the fun in that? So I'm going to start out with some black. I really actually almost never use the color black when I'm painting, but I feel like that's the vibe. You guys see this? Look, you can see this liquid coming out of the paint. I like to highlight stuff like that. Look, it's all this like glue coming out of the paint. Ugh, what's going on? I like to kind of highlight stuff like that because, things never work perfectly when you're painting. So you always have to work around these little like glitches and stuff that happen in terms of the analog materials that you're working with. And I'm just going to start with black. I'm just going to throw in some black like night sky up here. Let's just do this. One other thing is that, if you watched the previous ones, you would know this. If you didn't, that's cool too. I'm also kind of working on the scale that I'm painting with here. I could crack out and just make something super, super detailed that would take me like 5 hours to paint. I didn't think it would be that interesting to see me going like putting each little bump into someone's tiny little halo in this super detailed picture. Maybe we'll get there eventually, but I'm also working with the scale, so I might try and be like a little bit faster and looser here. If it goes really fast, maybe I'll do 2 even, but the time goes really, really quickly when you're painting, so we'll see how that goes. I'm just going to move some stuff around over here. And actually, yeah, it's fine. I'm trying to think. I should really move my palette to the other side. Let's just try it. This is experimental episode. Boom. Then I kind of got to move this over here. Cool. Yeah, let's see how this goes. Actually, the light's further away. I'm just going to roll with it. Put it back how it was. And it's kind of fitting that I'm starting with black. Black is... Who is it? Rembrandt? I think it was Rembrandt. Or it was Renoir. It's one of those two guys. It sucks that I'm mixing them up right now. I'm just going to throw in like a night sky up here. Let's just do it. It was Rembrandt or Renoir that said, I spent 40 years learning that black is the queen of all colors. Just a really badass quote. And it's definitely true. Black, it just kind of like rules over every other color. It's almost like, everyone, I don't know if everyone knows, there's like that kind of like joke from when you were a little kid, like, what color was George Washington's white horse? And then someone says white, and you're like, white's not a color. It's not really true, but black doesn't really function as a color in the same way that the other colors do. It really kind of like rules over them in a way. It also has this kind of relationship to darkness, one of the earliest symbols ever. Darkness is kind of a symbol in man's mind if you think about it. When I was younger, I read a book. It's called At Day's Close. It's a pretty cool book. And I picked it up because I heard the author giving a talk somewhere. It's like on some TV show or something. And he said the book was about the history of night in human civilization. Just like that's what the book is. It's a history of night itself. And I thought that was just so interesting. I was like, wow, what? And I picked it up, and it's a really cool book. And it's all about exactly that. It's all about the history of night and how night has been. And since then, I always feel like I use night in my art kind of symbolically. Like in my avatars a lot, if you've seen me change my avatars a lot. Can you guys hear me? Is this all in focus and stuff? I just want to make sure everything's cool. I didn't like check in with everyone. Damn, dude. I dig that. All right, I guess you guys can hear me. And you guys can see. I can see what's on the screen, but I just like to check in. I think it's cool. I'll poke in a second. I think I'm just like a second behind the chat. Oh, also if you're in the chat, so I can't do super chats yet, so like it's way easier for me to see stuff if you write like at Owen Cyclops or something. Sometimes I see some people doing that. It just makes it like 10,000 times easier to see what you guys are saying to me. Anyway, so yeah, I'm throwing in this black. Damn, this looks sick right now. And yeah, since then I use night like symbolically in my art. If you've seen me change my avatars, if you've seen me use like different avatars, I often have a setup. Maybe I'll do something like that right now actually, where I'll have my face in the middle. Or I do this with other pictures too, but normally on Twitter it's like pictures of me. Well, I'll have someone's face in the middle, and then on the left and right, I will have it be day and night. I guess that's also kind of a motif that I picked up from Tibetan art. It happens in medieval art. You'll see it in pictures of the crucifixion. I'm setting up my paper towels right now. I didn't do that beforehand. You see it in pictures of the crucifixion also, where there'll be Jesus and there's the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time. And Himalayan pictures of Buddha and things like that. That's really common also. And in the crucifixion, it has a slightly different symbolism because normally sun is eclipsed. It's like the sun is like hiding its face from this like horrible moment in time. Sometimes that's how it's described. I'm not saying that's how it is, but sometimes that's how it's described. In the Himalayan art, it's used more like the sun and the moon are in the sky at the same time, because it's showing that that moment is beyond time. It's existing. You're looking into this painting window that's showing you a completely like atemporal space. So if you look at pictures of like Buddha's enlightenment, things like from Nepal and Tibet, they'll have that moon and sky, the moon and sun in the sky at the same time. All right, so I'm gonna take the black and I'm gonna fade it. Not really gonna fade it because I'm not painting a gradient, but I'm gonna butt it up against this indigo. I love this indigo color because it's really, really dark, but it's not black. So it's like the darkest color I can get that isn't black. And sometimes I feel like it's almost like the gateway that I use to black. It kind of will open up the other colors and not make the contrast so stark between the black and the blue. I mean, between the black and all the other colors. And right now I kind of have to decide how I want to play it. I could just throw down more blue and just keep it going, like extend the black down. But then whatever I end up painting in the center, I'm going to have to paint over paint. Does that make sense? Like in this black sky, I'm going to go back in and paint in like moon and stars, or, you know, whatever I end up doing up here. And that's pretty safe for small details, but for large areas that I want to shade in, I wouldn't say it's like the safest bet in the world. So if I'm going to put something in the middle, which obviously I'm going to, I'm not making like an abstract painting on this stream right now, I have to leave it open. I don't have to, but I should leave it open a little bit. I kind of want to put someone's head, like a head shape over here, and have the shoulders coming down, but I do that all the time. I mean, I'm trying to do something different every time on the stream, so I'm actually just going to lay out a kind of like geometric space, and maybe I'll put like a church or like a castle or some kind of building or some kind of structure in there. Maybe it's not even going to be like super clear like what the structure is, but that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to give myself a lot of room. So actually, I'm just going to have the blue coming down right like this. The nice thing about using the colors right out of the tube also is that I know that if let's say I want to cut in more, and let's say I paint like something right here and I want to bring it in the blue, I can just take the indigo right out of the tube. I'm not going to have to worry about mixing the same exact color again and having it be perfect. Okay, cool. And I'm just going to pick this up right here. And yeah, I thought I would start with the darker colors for a few reasons. The last one I did was very like blown out pastels, like Miami style. I had just gone to Florida. That's probably why. But I don't know. You know, I don't really know how much I should talk about it, but it's interesting because, I don't know. I feel like I was posting on Patreon before and I wrote this on there, but it's something I've also been thinking about a lot. I feel like before, you know, let's say before like a certain date, before a certain time, before I started like living a certain way, I guess you could say, my life was very like, I'm just not going to worry about sounding pretentious. I just feel like it's like just us talking. Like I'm sure there's not like hundreds of people watching this. So, you know, I'll just kind of like be candid with you guys while I'm painting. You know, I feel like my life was like very like gray and like neutral. And like I was never really like sad about things. And good things happened and I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. I was kind of like coasting along. But then past like a certain point, it probably has to do with me like not, you know, smoking weed like literally all the time anymore and stuff like that. Or, you know, just like maturing. You know, it's probably like a confluence of different factors. But since then, I feel like instead of being like just gray, maybe I'll use gray in this picture since I'm talking about it. Instead of being like just gray, it became like a polarized mix of like, of like the opposites of like black and white. And now people ask me how I'm doing and like kind of want to be like, well, it's averaging, you know, I'm averaging a good score, you know, let's say it's like, I wouldn't even say it's a 5. I mean, it's probably like higher than that, you know, maybe like an 8, maybe like a 7 or a 6, you know, but it's averaging that score because I'm getting this mix of, you know, really, really good and really bad. And I just feel like that's kind of like how my life's been. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's always been that way and I was just like numbing myself to it, or if it actually just has changed that way. But it's like, oh, I got married, like that's really awesome, but I have this like medical thing that really sucks, and like, oh, my grandpa died, that sucks, but like, oh, I got this really cool job with my art, like that's really cool, and like, oh, my dad, like his friend died, like that really sucks, and then, oh, but this other thing happened, like that's really cool. And I just feel like it's so interesting, man. For at least the last like year, it's just been like boom, 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 like left and right. And I don't know, it makes me think a lot about like all the theological stuff that I'm into. Like, my wife will jokingly, like, something will go wrong with the car, and she's like, oh, why does everything have to be so hard? And I'm like, well, because we live in a fallen world. That's why. That's why. I'm like, I'm joking, but also I don't know. How much am I really joking? Okay. So, I gotta put something down below here, and I'm thinking about doing something that it kind of crossed my mind. I didn't think I was gonna do it, but actually I am gonna do it. I'm gonna put kind of like a cup, almost like a coffee cup, I guess, down here on the bottom. I also want to have room though. I want to have room on the bottom because I want to put in some kind of like underworld, like monster kind of figure down over here. And I want to have the mouth open with some teeth and get like something in there. Actually, now that I'm saying that, that just sounds like so awesome that there's no way I'm not going to do that. So maybe I'll start with that. Since I know that's what I want to do. Yeah, I am going to start with that. And for this underground like area that I'm going to put in, I'm just going to throw down some of this Venetian red. Going kind of fast, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm experimenting here. Okay, cool. And this Venetian red is a really awesome color. I've mentioned it before on the stream. I'm also like naming the colors I use so that if you get into painting, you can use them. Or, even just talking about color, if you're on a date with some girl and you're like, wow, I really love your dress. It's like Venetian red. They're going to be impressed, guys. They're going to be impressed. Okay, so I love this color. For me, all the colors have like, I don't know what the word is. It's like synesthetic, but instead of being senses cross, synesthetic, like synesthesia, in case anyone doesn't know, is when you have two senses cross. So like you see a color and then your mouth like has a taste in it, or you look at a number and then it gives you like a sound, or it's when two of your senses are crossed in a way that is like illogical, you could say atypical. I don't know what the word is for synesthetic when it's informational, because sometimes I feel like certain colors, for me it's mostly colors, shapes, things like that. It's almost like they carry like a level of information in them. So it's like you have synesthesia, but instead of getting like an actual sense data thing, you get information. And that's how I feel about Venetian red. I feel like just when I look at this color, it makes me think of like ancient times and like ancient pottery. I mentioned before, but I went to Pompeii once, and the walls are straight up this color. They're 100% this color. They must have just like dug it out of the earth and painted their walls like this. So yeah, it always makes me think of like antiquity. That also makes it interesting to use as like a dirt color. It's kind of like, what things buried underneath the surface, aging, but it's very rich. It's not like a dull dirt color. Also, if you've seen walls from like Roman frescoes and Roman villas and stuff, they have them in some museums. They're almost exactly this color. Okay, and I'm leaving a lot of space down here because, like I said, I want to put this like lump in, kind of like just like a lumpen monster face. We might even get a little primitive on here. And I mentioned it a long time ago, but when I'm doing this, I'm not really thinking of it as like painting, like I'm going to make a painting that's going to like hang in a museum or something like that. It's more like I'm just ideating. I'm just having ideas while I'm working. So it's almost like this is like sketching, painting. And I wanted to do that on the live stream for a variety of reasons. A lot of people hit me up and they're like, oh, I want to get into art. Like I want to get into painting, but I'm just not like good at it, And I'm always like, okay, who cares? Like, who cares if you're good at it, dude? Just do it. And I feel like artists in general, every artist does this because you have like an image and, you want to keep people thinking of you in a positive way. But, if you're an artist, even if you're a great artist, and you do something bad, you're not going to show it to people, right? I'm sure every artist, if you're watching this, you've done art, you've made something and then been like, oh, well, no one's ever going to see this. And then you just like delete it or throw it away or something. But then for, normal people who are never involved in art at all, it kind of creates this illusion where it's like, oh my God, like, you just have this magic touch. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about, like really great painters or something, where everything you do just must be like so great. And it's this like magic skill you have. But really it's more that you get in this car and you crash it like 10,000 times. And then the few times that you don't crash it, those are the ones you like save the video of and show people. So I like the idea of just going really loose on the stream and just encouraging other people to do it. It's also funny because I'm talking while I'm doing this, but when I'm not streaming and I'm painting, these are still the things that I think of. It's like if I throw down some super like dark black color, I'll be thinking about the symbolic quality of it and what it means and all these different like informational levels while I'm doing it. So it's not like I'm just faking it and like struggling to throw on a monologue to entertain people right now. So yeah, I'm going to throw down this underworld. And I mentioned this on the last stream, but I really like the setup of, it's kind of like the Platonic three worlds. It's like the most classic like shamanic worldview. Even in Christianity it has this. It's one of the most general, universal aspects of humans viewing the world in any sense. That you have the overworld, divinity, God, the heavens, sky, gods if you're some Mongolian shaman, or it's heaven if you're a Christian person, above you, this realm up here. Then you have the terrestrial realm, the earthly realm where we are in the middle. Then you have the underworld down below. And most of my images in some way like reflect that motif, whether it's consciously or not, especially if it's a scene or something. I think at a certain point you can't really help but use that, especially if you have that information in your mind, just because that's how it is when you look out the window. You have your sky up above, you have the land around you, and then you have the earth down below. And I'm actually going to start with the underworld down over here. I'm just going to start with the bottom down over here. I really love the underworld as kind of like a motif in a way. It's very like Jordan Peterson. If anyone's listened to Jordan Peterson talk before, you can just kick off into like, you think you know where you are, but one day you come home and your wife's been cheating on you. Bam, you're in the underworld. You thought you knew where you were, but you don't. And it's really funny. I want to get what I'm doing right now, I want to get all the Venetian red off this brush so that when I go in for this cadmium scarlet here, which is the color I'm using, it doesn't have any of this darker color that's going to be weighing this down. The difference between getting like the pure pigment and getting the pigment with like a little bit of X, Y, or Z added to it is a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. So I'm just making sure this is clear over here. All right. And I'm going to throw in this kind of like devil-y figure. Sometimes what I like to do, I haven't used this in like work I've been showing people, but if I'm just sketching on my own and using like, markers or whatever in the studio, I like to make the devil blue sometimes, or have these like demonic figures be blue. There is some Renaissance art. Oh, actually I have some here in my room. I could grab it. I don't know exactly where it is. I don't want to walk away from the camera and then be wandering around my studio. But I'm just going to go for it and just paint this in red. There is some Renaissance art and earlier art where the devil is actually painted in blue. And the logistics that I've heard about that is that the devil is, the furthest away from God's love, which is like a warm thing. So he's blue and he's cold. Actually, in the image that I have here, I really want to try and find it, but I don't want. I'm looking just to see if I can see it on my bookshelf, but I don't see it. The image that I have here somewhere is from the dome of the baptistry in Florence. I don't know if it's from the Duomo, which is like the main cathedral there, or if it's from the dome of the baptistry. I actually don't, or if it's even called a baptistry. Is that what it's called? The place where you baptize kids? But if you've been to Florence, if you haven't, you should definitely go. I sound really pretentious, but I'm also broke and like can't pay my dentist, so don't paint me in some life of luxury. But I have been to Florence, and there's the Duomo. So there's that big famous cathedral that has the dome, and it's like super famous in art history. And in front of it is a little tiny building, and that's the baptistry. And it's 8-sided. That's really actually common for these buildings where they would baptize kids back in the day. And there's a dome in there. It's not really a dome, but there's like a ceiling mosaic in there. There's also obviously a lot of ceiling art in the main cathedral there. So I can't remember which one it's in. I've been inside both. But yeah, they have the devil there, and he's blue. He's this super dark blue color. And like I said, the logistics there was that he's the furthest away from like the warmth of God's love. So since we're so used to, essentially all pop culture, even like candy advertisements and things like that, the devil being red. It's kind of cool to break out like the blue devil with the horns, and I think it gets people like thinking in a way. It's kind of like atypical. But I didn't do it. I didn't want to use the blue devil down here. Probably would have gone with the indigo, but I was just feeling the scarlet. I feel like I had to get it in here. There we go. And I'm going to throw down some kind of mouth in here with some teeth. I guess we are going like a little primal, a little primitive. It can't all be very refined. It's kind of what I was thinking about this week anyway, too. Some primitive things. So we're going to get a big, almost like comic-y like mouth down here with some teeth. And then I'm going to put something in the mouth. That's another motif I really like using, is like getting these, teeth, like just like the caveman style, almost like just very like basic symbolic teeth. When you put something in there, I think it has like a kind of psychological effect on people. Teeth, fear of like biting. It's so like primitive and deeply ingrained down deep in your psyche. So we're going to do that. And I guess part of the theme of the picture I'm doing right now is going to be these like ancient symbols, like primal. Not really ancient. Ancient's really the wrong word. Ancient makes people think of like antiquity. You hear ancient, you're thinking about togas and columns and stuff like that. Really like primordials, like a word that I like using. And I do differentiate symbols based on that, based on whether or not they... where they kind of fit on the timeline. Something like a letter. If I painted like an envelope in here or something, that registers in a totally different way than something like a spear or, a primitive tool like a hammer, even someone's hand. These are kind of ancient symbols that have always been around in the human psyche for like thousands and thousands of years. Okay. I like the vibe that I'm getting going here, and I'm going to paint some stuff into the night sky. I'm going to come back up here. Here I have kind of a big decision. I'm going to turn this palette, but that's not the big decision. I could paint the stars and things like that up here in white. I actually haven't gotten confirmation that you guys can like see what I'm doing and stuff in the chat. I'm just going to look. Yeah, the color, blocking off colors is so Rothko. People can see what I'm talking about here. Okay, cool. Oh, I sent you a doodle. It had 3 sections. Yeah, I remember that actually. I know exactly who you are. Nice. People send me art that they do sometimes, and I love it. It's really awesome. I don't know if I told this story on the stream before. All right, wait, hold up. I have a choice to make, and it's not that big a choice, but it does matter, and it's going to change the vibe of the picture. So I'm going to paint in the moon and some stars, and then I'm going to put something up here in the middle. The question is, am I going to paint them in white, or am I going to give them a little bit of a hue? I don't really know. For the moon, I have 2 options in my mind right now. I could paint the moon in... Whoa, I got black on my glove. I'm going to change my gloves. I could paint the moon in with like a light blue. The moon does have kind of like a light blue hue to it when you see it at night, in case you haven't noticed for your entire life. I also like painting it in yellow a little bit, but I don't know. Let's go with blue. Let's keep it straight. And what color blue am I going to use? I'm going to make it white with a tiny bit of cerulean. Or I could use the indigo. What I could do, what I actually am going to do now that I'm saying it, is I'm going to grab the white and I'm going to blue the white a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of blue in it. And I'm going to use the indigo so it's kind of married with the blue background over here. It's funny because, like I said, I was talking to my wife before, and she was like, oh, you don't like map out what you're going to talk about. And honestly, every time I get on here, I just feel like I have like way too much to talk about. I have to like pause these topics, and I should probably straighten it out a little bit. But I think the stream of consciousness and just keeping it casual, kind of like we're hanging out, is more compelling. Oh, just looked up and saw an extremely dank question. How do I decide what phase of the moon I'm going to use? What's up, great question asker? Hello, great questions department. Yeah, so... Hold on a sec. Nice. That was the first time I sneezed while live streaming. Okay. So, if you don't know this, you're about to learn something that you can use basically every day, every night for the rest of your life. So... The moon, its phases, you are most likely aware that sometimes it looks like this. Sometimes it looks like this. Sometimes it's full, of course, but everyone knows that. So in my artwork, I do use the phases of the moon intentionally. Something really classy is like in a comic. If you have it in the background and then, something happens and then a few panels later something else happens, you can make the moon change phases in the background. I love doing that, actually. But in case anyone doesn't know, so you're looking at these two moons, how do you know which one is getting bigger? How do you know which one is getting smaller? It's actually super easy. If you take a line and draw it down the middle of the moon like this moon is making a little B because it's getting bigger. So this moon is slowly going to get bigger. This one is going to progress into a full moon. This moon over here is making a D, like the word dying. This moon is getting smaller, so if you have a moon like that, it's going to slowly fade out and eventually go away. But then it's going to come back. Don't worry. So that's how you can tell whether you're using a waxing or a waning moon. And I do use that intentionally. If I'm making an image for someone, like I was making an image of someone's daughter before. Someone got me to make this picture of their daughter. So I'm not going to put a getting smaller moon in there because it's kind of bad symbolism in my opinion. So I put a getting bigger moon because that's positive symbolism. And I do use that intentionally. The thing is, in this sky right now, I'm thinking I'm going to go crazy and I might just use both. I might just throw both in on both sides. I don't want to make it totally a downer, but I do want to get a little bit of the the waning moon vibe in there. Let's see how this is with the white and the indigo. I might have just made it way too dark, but let's see how it goes. Someone messaged me once when they were talking about painting, and they were like, wow, it's really easy to make colors darker and it's almost impossible to make them lighter. And I said, yes, you have learned a great lesson. It's really easy to make the colors darker. I probably made this way too dark already, but it's almost impossible to make them lighter. Once you have it at a certain level of darkness, then it's almost impossible to lighten it up. Someone asked, what if you're in the southern hemisphere? What's really weird is that it actually doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into it right now. Some people probably know I have crazy feelings about space. I don't actually have really many conclusions about it, but it's really weird. If you look into the perspective on the moon from northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, I'm not speaking in code and trying to hint at something crazy right now. But it is interesting. If you look into it, the perspective is not really how you would think it would be. That is not some coded statement about what I really think about the moon or something, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It's the same both ways. All right, this is a little bit better. The color is going to dry a little bit darker than it looks here, so I'm just going to go for it. Something cool about the moon being blue. I was actually thinking about this before because I was painting some red stuff. So everyone's kind of familiar, and if you're not, you can probably kind of imagine. It's nighttime right now. You could go outside and look at it right now. The moon has this kind of silvery light to it. Things at night are often cast in this blue light. And if you look at photos of things at night, or if you just go outside at night with a piece of paper and look at what color it is in there, it's going to have a blue hue to it. I'm sure most people are probably familiar, and now you will be if you haven't noticed it before. But sometimes if you go out at night, you can actually even imagine it this way. This is the way I imagine it. If you look out at stuff at night, sometimes you're like, wow, I would need so much blue to paint this scene right now. Everything has just a little bit of blue in it. What's really interesting is that, do I want to use the big brush? We could just go straight fully primitive and only use the big brush, but I think I should. This is me changing weapons. Everyone here has played a video game before. This is kind of the heavy duty bazooka, and then this is the sniper rifle. So I'm kind of just trying to decide if I should change between them, and I am going to do that. So yeah, you've probably noticed the blue hue of the moon and stuff at night. The interesting thing is that the moon is supposedly, and again, I'm not hinting at something, I'm just giving it to you from a neutral perspective. The moon is, let's say it is, the reflected light of the sun, right? So actually, moonlight shouldn't be blue. That kind of makes no sense. It should be the same hue as sunlight with this nice warm tone to it. And the interesting thing is that there is a non-conspiratorial answer that is actually definitely real. It's rare. You might as well cherish that while you can get it. Which is that your eyes are what's changing the color of the moon and the light at night. When it gets to be dark, so I'm going to keep going on that in a second. I'm just going to paint these two opposite moons up here. when it gets to be dark, your eyes completely adjust and change. And not only do they, so that's obvious, you're like, oh, they need to let more light in, duh. But there's also a color shifting effect that happens at night, where the whole red end of the spectrum is shortened. Oh, here we go, let's paint on this moon. Normally, when I'm painting, I get in super close, but I'm trying not to do that because I have the camera here, so I'm also getting used to painting from like a little bit further away. Also, you know, I could bring the camera down, but then I have to focus it again, so I'm also getting used to like how I'm trying to use the focus and the autofocus and stuff like that. I'm also just noticing that I'm really hot in my studio, so I'm gonna take off my hat. You know, it's vaporwave style. I got the Miami Dolphins hat in real life. I've actually never seen them play, but I got that hat from my grandpa's house when I went there. So anyway, so your eyes at night shift the color spectrum, and they add kind of like a blue hue to everything, and they also remove red from the light that you're seeing. So that effect has a name. I forget what it is, but when you notice the silvery light of the moon, that's actually because your eyes have kicked into this other mode, and they're filtering out, like, you know, to speak unscientifically, the warm aspect of the light. They're adding like a blue shift to the light. And this guy noticed that. He's a scientist. He noticed that because he was gardening, and he had these roses in his garden. And what he noticed was that, it's actually really, really smart. He must have been a painter or something to notice this. He noticed that during the day, the red roses were, it's kind of a crooked little like messed up kind of moon, but I like it. We're just going to roll with it. He noticed that during the day, the roses were brighter. They were like lighter than the leaves around them. But then as it got dark, the roses became darker than the leaves around them. And that's true. If your friend's like wearing a red shirt, during the day it'll be really, really, really bright. But then at night, when your eyes shift over to night mode, the red shirt will be a lot darker. It's because your eyes are shifting out the red light and shifting into this like other blue mode. And that's how that effect got discovered. So that's a really long way of saying that I'm painting the moon here in blue, not because the moon is actually blue, of course, but because of that effect. And that's pretty well documented, the silvery light of the moon. The moon's always been associated with silver. Someone asked me about alchemy in the chat before. Silver is the metal associated with the moon. So it's not like that guy was the first one to notice it. He was just the first one to put it in terms of like modern Western science. The moon is one of the dopest symbols, honestly. Often when I use it, part of why I'm using it here, I guess, subconsciously, is that it represents things going away and coming back and things changing. Obviously, the moon has phases. The moon changes. In alchemy, speaking of alchemy, maybe we'll talk about alchemy a little bit. The world that we live in is sometimes called the sublunar world, as in the world that is below the moon, lunar, duh. And this is the world where things change. Things change in our world. You know, plants die, plants grow, people die, things change. We live underneath the moon. It's like this dome almost. Well, they wouldn't describe it as a dome. It's like a sphere that we live inside. Or maybe they would describe it as a dome, whatever. But we live under this like bar. And underneath the moon, things change. But then beyond the moon, beyond this like level, things don't change. And that's the world of like theology, angels, spirits, principles, laws of the universe, and things like that. And I do use that motif in my art sometimes. Actually, quick little detour. Boom. I have this board. I kind of want to turn the camera, but I don't want to accidentally show stuff in my studio. I have this board behind me where I keep art on this bulletin board that I'm like getting ready to launch out and stuff like that. And I just pulled this off of here so you can see. Perfect. Really enjoying the amateur casual feel of the stream. I hope you guys are into it. So yeah, you can see here. So I have this image. See, I could refocus the camera. Should I? Yeah, I'll do it. Why not? I'm pulling this up. Let's see if I can unfocus and refocus the camera really easily. Oh, but then I have to move it. All right, yeah, I'm not going to do it actually, because I have to move the camera up and move it down. It's not a good idea. Anyway, though, here I have this image. Actually, almost all the images on this board are about like death and like darker themes. That's what I was going to kick into for winter, but it didn't really play out that way. Anyway, down here at the bottom, you can see I put in this sort of like dome, this barrier, and I put the moon here because these people, you can see their bones, kind of like illustrates their mortality, that kind of thing. It implies like their deathly nature, their existence in the world of death, you could say. they are under this lunar sphere. They're in the sublunar world. And then often what you'll see in alchemical images, not this one that I made, but ones like this, there'll be all these rings coming all around, and there'll be like a ring, and then there's Mercury, and a ring, and then there's Saturn, and a ring, and then there's Jupiter. And it's like the planets are encased in these spheres, and I'm kind of repeating myself now, but the lowest sphere, that's the sphere wherein things change where we live, and it's associated with the moon. Perfect. You're going to be on a date with a girl, looking at the moon, you're going to say, you know, it's funny, my friend was telling me about the sublunar world. You know about this effect where roses look darker at night? And she's going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, it's kind of a long walk, but I like it. I could talk about the moon a lot. It's like one of the most ancient symbols in art, along with all the other stuff we were talking about. Maybe we'll come back to that. Okay, so now what I'm thinking is that I would like to... It's so annoying that I'm not going to do this right now. I would like to put a full moon up here. Maybe I should do that. But there's this symbol. It's really common in, one of the other reasons why I wanted to do this stream just in general was to talk about symbolism. And it's one of the things I've studied the most in my life. So it's good that we're doing this. There's this symbol. You may have seen it before. Maybe you haven't. Where it's like this. There's a full moon. And then there's the two other phases of the moon on the side, like this. And then like this also. Cool. So if you want to learn a new symbol today, if you've never seen this, there you go. This is unfortunately a Wiccan symbol. Wiccan, like Wicca, like witches and stuff like that. Hold on a second. You know what's funny? I know what's going to happen. Is YouTube's going to cut this and make this the thumbnail of my video. It's kind of funny. Anyway, though, this is called the triple goddess symbol. They use it in Wicca and neo-paganism. No one really does. I don't know how much I should go into this. No one really calls it Wicca anymore. No one really does Wicca. Yeah, we'll do a little detour right now. Wicca, in case anyone doesn't know, was founded by this guy. It was one guy. By the way, a guy started it. His name's Gerald Gardner. He was friends with Aleister Crowley. So there's some Crowleyan Golden Dawn rituals in Wicca. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's kind of too much to go into right now, but you can check it out or I'll go into it later. And he started this thing called Wicca. And it was basically I don't want to call it the first, but it was modern, feminine, magic stuff. Dude, we're just going to become druids again and all this stuff. And I think it's really lame. It's my own subjective opinion. But also I think that most other people now think it's lame because you may know, if you're keeping up with the general spiritual scene, like I am, that witchy stuff is extremely popular. This is actually a pretty interesting note, so we're going to talk about it for a second. Witchy stuff is extremely popular. You can go into any Urban Outfitters, any store, hang out with a bunch of, frankly, women of any age, I feel but especially younger. And just the vibe of witchiness, tarot cards, anything magic-y, crystal balls, even just the aesthetic, astrology. I mean, come on, is it your first day on Twitter? You obviously know about this. But no one identifies with this tradition that's called Wicca, which was in and of itself very instrumental in popularizing an aspect of it. It's interesting because if you study weird occult stuff or just general, I don't know what to call it. It's folk occult. It's just the general flow of occult things in society. If you're tracking I guess you could say normal religions, it's really easy to be oh well, here's this guy and they started this movement and then they did this thing and it tracks a little graph. You can really easily be oh, and then this is over here. But when you're looking at modern occult stuff, especially post 1900, post 1850, it really all just doesn't work that way, and it all flows around where you're oh, here's this thing from Wicca, but actually that came from the Golden Dawn, which is really from this Jewish thing, and then here's chaos magic, and now this person, and people never really identify with one little part of this network. There's actually something that's really interesting for me when I talk to people about this, because I try and not be can I curse on YouTube? I don't even know. You're allowed to do that, right? I try not to be a smug asshole. But when I'm talking to people about, if they're really into the occult or Western occult or stuff like that, I'll ask them, because I know about it, what aspect, when you say you're into the occult, what do you identify with in there? Are you talking about Aleister Crowley? Are you talking about Golden Dawn? Are you talking about chaos magic? Are you talking about, and they really never are able to say, oh yeah, I'm, like if you're a Christian, you could say, actually, I'm a, Second Reformed Seventh Day Adventist. You have like a title and you're like, yeah, this is very clearly what I am usually. And it doesn't really work that way for the occult. It's all like intermingled and tangled up. Anyway, so this symbol, that was a nice little detour. That was perfect. I'm trying to get the length of the detours to be nice and concise, but still interesting. That was a perfect length for the detour. So anyway, they use this symbol in Wicca, and it kind of prevents me from, I don't want to put the full moon here because then to me it looks like this Wiccan symbol that I used to see a lot, and it kind of brings that vibe. But on the other hand, I have this other sort of aspect of my like image making philosophy where I don't really like to concede symbolic territory to other people, especially if I'm making, theological images. I forget what book this is in now. I wish I remembered, but someone was talking about in this book about how, the full moon is associated with like spooky spirits and like bad things happening. And there's some theologian who said, there's nothing wrong with the full moon. What the devil does is the devil does bad things in coordination with the moon's cycles to pervert this aspect of God's creation that is actually good, which is the moon. There's nothing wrong with the moon. God made it, right? He didn't make this like evil light and like set it in the sky. And I often think about that when I'm debating about using certain symbols. Like I was making a picture before and I was going to use an owl. And then I was like, well, owls are kind of this like secret society, symbol for like Bohemian Grove kind of vibe. And then I was like, dude, I'm not gonna give up the territory of the owl. I'm not gonna never use an owl in my art ever again because some people that are bad used it. So I always go back and forth between those two things. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. Like the pentagram, in case anyone doesn't know, the pentagram used to be a straight up Christian symbol for the 5 wounds of Jesus. The star inside a circle. Used to be a Christian symbol. In some Arthurian legends, one of the knights is wearing a giant pentagram on his shield for, Jesus' wounds as a symbol. But at the same time, am I going to put on a shirt that has a pentagram on it and then tell every individual person, hey, just so you know, like this isn't... No, I'm not going to do that. So got to concede with reality sometimes. Anyway, so for that reason, I'm not going to put the full moon up here. I feel like I want to put something a little bit more like, I don't know, some kind of like symbolic something up there. Something a little unexpected. I like to do things that are unexpected, but let's see. I'm going to throw in some ground. Let's see how far we are along right now. I feel like we're just getting started. Wow, are you freaking kidding? I feel like we're just getting started, and it's been 57 minutes. That is completely and totally insane. But it's cool. Whatever. I'm not stressed about it. This is like a chill space. Okay, so the first time we did this, I did like an intermission and just straight up took questions, but I'm kind of trying to hybrid that with getting things happening here too. So I'll take some questions if you guys want to ask me questions. I'm going to start painting in some ground. It's not that exciting to talk about. I could talk about it, but I'll look at the chat if you want to ask me some stuff. I literally can't believe it's in 58 minutes. That is completely insane. I think I am just going to throw in the straight sap green right here. Let's see. It's a really intense color, but I probably should cut it. Yeah, I'm going to cut it with some Viridian or something. If no one asks me questions, though, I will just talk about some random stuff, and it probably will be interesting. Oh, yeah. Isn't the pentacle one point up, pentagram point down? Yeah, that comes from like Renaissance magic and stuff after that. The idea is that on the 5 points of the pentagram. So what I'm doing right here, well, I'm not really talking about it. I'm just going to mix like a darker green. I feel like this green with the red is going to be like, you don't really want that. It's going to be too crazy. So, actually though, I don't have to use green. This is going to decide a lot of the feeling. But I think I'm going to use this yellow ochre. I think I'm going to use kind of like a dead grass, kind of like dry earth color. I don't know. Have I been feeling the darker elements of life more recently, and now I'm putting that into my picture? Or do I just want to get this gold color in? Who can say? But I'm just going to throw in the straight yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is such an awesome color. It's a really beautiful color. You can use this color to dull down any other color. So if I really wanted to, I could mix it in with this green and get like a kind of dull green going, but I don't know. It's not really what my instinct is telling me to do, so I'm not going to do it. Where's my brush? Where's my paintbrush? I can't find it. That is very strange. Let's see. Slide it under here. Okay, this is officially intermission for a second while I'm looking for my paint. Oh, it's right here. Perfect. And yeah, I'll take some questions while I'm throwing in this yellow ochre, and then we'll kind of kick into phase 2. I guess inevitably, I called it painting hour. I wanted it to be just an hour, so it's super casual, like, oh yeah, I'll just pop in and watch this like Owen stream real quick. I guess inevitably it's going to be like 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then there'll be kind of like a break like this in the middle, but I don't know, I'm still feeling it out. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so I'll take some questions right now. We'll break it up from just me talking. Part of me would want to get like other people in, but then I'm opening up like a huge crazy can of worms. Do I have any after effects from psi abuse, like HPPD and stuff? Nah, man. I got nothing like that, which is really tight. You actually have to abuse psychedelics a little bit more than most people would think to... Oh, the camera's kind of like tilted. Let me just fix that. Perfect. Cool. You actually do have to do like a shit ton of psychedelics or use them like kind of irresponsibly to get like those permanent effects, in my opinion. HPPD and stuff, in case anyone doesn't know, it's, what is it? Hallucinogenic perception persistence disorder. It's where you get like visuals as though you're tripping like on from that. So no, I have nothing like that. Anything new I could talk about with psychedelics? Not really. Maybe I'll come back to that if more people ask me about it. Pretty random question. Oh, I live in a part of the country where there's snake handling Pentecostals, and I was wondering what you thought about that aesthetic. Oh, dude, you are speaking my language right now. So in case anyone doesn't know, I say that a lot. I just don't want to sound like I'm, I kind of hate when people are talking and then they kind of just presuppose that other people know what they're talking about. So, people know about all different kinds of things. Some people don't know about weird American religious stuff. So in case you don't know, there is a American religious phenomenon. I call it snake handlers. I guess it's just a manifestation of what you would call Pentecostalism, which maybe I'll talk about. That's a really interesting thing, man. I actually have a little book on it that I'm waiting to crack into, where they handle snakes. They're called snake handlers. If you just Google image search snake handlers, wow, this color was such a good call. We're going to keep it kind of loose and like chunky and like primitive style. It's just how it's going to go down. So yeah, there is this thing called snake handlers, and just like the name makes it sound, they straight up handle snakes. There's a part in the Bible where it says, something like, if you're faithful, you'll be able to handle snakes without being bitten, or like snakes won't bite the faithful. It says something like that. So these people took it straight up literally and started handling snakes to prove that they were faithful to God. And it's pretty insane. I'm kind of insane, so I'm not really judging. I don't really think you should do that, but yeah, and they straight up handle these snakes. And you should really look at the pictures if you haven't seen it. They're really crazy. There actually also is a film that I would highly recommend. It's called Holy Ghost People. I think it's called Holy Ghost People. And it's just like a short collection of footage from this one Pentecostal church. It must be like something like in the 50s in like West Virginia or something. And it's really a trip. It's true ethnography. In case anyone doesn't know what ethnography is like the study of peoples. Like if you went to Africa and studied some like tribe there, you would be doing ethnography. You'd make an ethnographic report. And that film, it's called Holy Ghost People, is true like down in the dirt America Pentecostal ethnography. What do I think about it? Well, the whole Pentecostal thing, you asked me what I think about that aesthetic. The aesthetic is obviously awesome. Are you serious right now? We're talking about like extreme... I'm going to paint some bones and like weird stuff down in the underworld down over here. What do I think about that aesthetic? Come on. Does it get better than that? Like kind of crazy mountain, rural American, extremely devoted Christians handling snakes and stuff in these little wooden buildings to prove that they're like faithful to God. Hello, have we met? Could I be more into that? So the aesthetic is awesome. What I think about it as a phenomenon is inseparable from, I guess you could say, my thoughts about Pentecostalism as a whole. Uh, Really, my thoughts about Pentecostalism, I guess you could call it that. I guess that is the proper scholastic term, is that it's just really weird. That's my academic takeaway after reading a lot about it and looking into it. It's an extremely strange thing. It's a very, very weird phenomenon. If anyone doesn't know, like speaking in tongues and stuff like that, that's like what Pentecostals do. Sometimes it's called charismatic Christianity. It has a bunch of names. It's kind of like, American non-denominational stuff in the sense that some people that are Pentecostal will say, yeah, I'm Pentecostal 100%. And then some people will be part of a Christian tradition that has Pentecostal elements. And they won't say, I'm Pentecostal. They might not even know what that means. Not in a dumb way. They just, they wouldn't identify that way is all I mean. And it's really weird, the whole speaking in tongues thing. The weirdest thing for me is that it comes out of nowhere like a bolt of lightning right around the turn of the century. It's always a weird, it's always a weird time when the centuries turn over. People, in my opinion, don't really realize that. But the numbers of the years and the way the centuries progress and, thinking of yourself as, I'm going to paint a skull over here. Got to get a skull in every picture. The way the centuries progress really affects people's mindset and how they're thinking about their lives and, their place in history and stuff. I had a professor once who studied Gothic literature, and he said there was always a revival or a big blow up of Gothic writing and kind of like creepy stories and stuff at the end of each century because, you get to be the 80s and the 90s of any century, and people start thinking about, the end of a century. It naturally affects like the collective psyche, thinking about death and stuff like that. And likewise, I just think it's somehow symbolic that the whole Pentecostal thing exploded at the beginning of the 1900s. I mean, could that really be a coincidence? That it just exploded out of nowhere, and it wasn't really a thing before that. I mean, you have Christianity going in all different cultures, all different places, all different times for so long, and then all of a sudden people are speaking in tongues. And not just a few of them, a lot of them. Speaking in tongues is almost like the hallmark of Pentecostal Christianity. I mean, I'm kind of overstating it maybe. I'm sure some people would have an issue with that. In my opinion, that's like the hallmark of it. And it's so weird. I don't know what to think about it. Seraphim Rose, in his book, I almost said Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, but the book is called Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, says that, I don't know if he says it's demonic, but I think he kind of politely is like, yeah, this is probably demonic. It's also strange because the whole speaking in tongues thing, they're called Pentecostals, but that's not what Pentecost was. When they got, the tongues of fire and were able to speak like that, they were speaking languages to other people that understood them. They weren't just like descending into like a stupor, and just babbling on and on and on. I think there's a lot of factors there. I think part of it is probably like social pressure, like you're in this church and everyone's doing it. But I don't think everyone's faking it. I think there is something weird about it, and I really don't know, man. I really don't know. When you get into strange phenomenons like that, it gets really interesting too, because I used this term last stream, but I would say in some ways I'm like a very like systematic theology type of person, which is interesting because while I'm obsessed with mystical phenomenon, and I guess I would describe myself as someone who is into mystical things. I wouldn't call myself a mystic because I'm not smart enough. I feel like to be a mystic, you have to like write stuff that gets other people into it. I'm not doing that yet. But I am really into mystical phenomenon. But at the same time, I'm going to put some stars up in here because I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I kind of just want to finish this train of thought before I dive into something else. I'm just going to put them in as dots. Yeah, so while I'm really into mystical things, I am also a systemic theology person in the sense that the things that I'm studying, I try and fit them into like a larger framework. Like for a while when I was reading about religious phenomena, you read about, oh, there's this shaman in Vietnam who does this thing, and there's this Mongolian Tengrist, like sky deity ritual, and they do this thing, and in South America they're doing ayahuasca and they do this thing. And for a while I was kind of like just gathering like the data, but now I try and fit it into some theory, into some larger framework. I can't help it. I have to say, you know, what's the mechanism behind this? What's explaining this? While I'm up here, I'm also just going to fix this little black part up here. And when you get into the visionary, weird stuff in modern Christianity, it's really, really, really difficult, man. Because, like, what? Are you really going to say that all the Pentecostal stuff is, like, demons? Like, that demons... And, dude, do you know how popular the Pentecostal stuff is? If you run the numbers on that, it is insane. They're a huge percentage of modern Christians are Pentecostal. An absolutely absurd number. I'm going to outline this bottom character in alizarin crimson while I'm talking about this. So yeah, are you really going to say like it's demons? Like all those churches are having people possessed by demons and that's why they are doing that? I don't know. Maybe. Seems like kind of a stretch though, honestly. But that could be it. But it's hard to fit in some framework. Then you get stuff like the visions. Like people have visions of, you know, I don't want to name anything in particular. I'm sure you guys may know what I'm talking about. Okay, so this color is really, really see-through. So I'm going to punch it up. I'm going to make it less see-through, make it more opaque with the yellow ochre. That'll also dull it down a little bit. I have this kind of like weird primitive color palette thing going on right now. So I don't want to like shock that with like any really, really, you know, the alizarin crimson kind of has like a chemical feel to it, you could say, if I was being harsh. So I'm going to tone it down. I'm going to tone down the saturation. If you watch one of the first episodes and you are familiar with color theory terminology, I'm going to tone down the saturation. There we go. It's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. So yeah, then the vision stuff gets difficult too because people have visions of like the Virgin Mary, this saint, that saint, all this stuff. And hey, that's awesome. I mean, like I said, I'm a mystical guy. I couldn't be more down. But at the same time, you have to fit it into a framework. And sometimes what those people are told doesn't fit into a theological framework. And then how do you explain it? I don't know. It's a vision that told people to pray and be good Christians. Could that really be a demon? I don't know. It sounds kind of unlikely. At the same time, what if it told them something that's not theologically sound? Then it can't be a saint then, right? Maybe it could though. Who knows? So anyway, it's kind of a long walk, but the whole Pentecostal thing, I don't really know what to think about it. Snake handling, which is what you initially asked me about, fits into that. It's kind of like the American aspect of it. But if you don't know about Pentecostal stuff, check it out because, you know, no one ever talks about that on Twitter. I guess there's no like Pentecostals on Twitter, right? In my town, there's a lot of Pentecostals and not that it's related, but there's also like Mennonites and Amish people and stuff like that. And the Pentecostal group here dresses kind of weird. I mean, I like it. I'm fixing the camera. Sorry if I'm giving you like Blair Witch Project right now. But they dress in a really particular way. So you should check it out. No one ever talks about them on Twitter. I guess there's no like Pentecostals on Twitter defending themselves, or maybe they just keep it on the DL. Okay, that was a long question, but that was a good one, man. That was a really good one. Yeah, let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. I don't want to waste too much time scrolling through the feed, so I'm just going to look at random questions here. Thoughts on the confused spiritualism, ex-Americana culture of the 60s, 70s? Oh, dude, did you just alley-oop that question? It perfectly fits with what I was just talking about. Yeah, the generally confused spirituality. Ugh, man, there's so many factors. It really just... Let's see how dark this is now. Let's see if I made this dark enough. And let me know if it's not in focus. Like I said, I turned the autofocus off. I think it is in focus. I'm just going to take a second to see. Like, see, I have to like scroll manually. Like, that's definitely out of focus. Now we're going to come back up. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I have it on 20 right now. I think 20 is the mode. But let's see what happens if I go to 25. Is it more in focus or less? I can't tell. I think it's good at like 25. Yeah, I think it's good. Okay. Oh yeah, spirituality of the 60s and stuff. Yeah, man, it's I'm coming in doing these lines. That looks good. Man, I got to paint the perfect consistency. Look at that. Oh, wow, that was so satisfying. It's so satisfying when the paint is just the perfect consistency and you lay it down perfectly. Yeah, man, it's a confluence of so many factors. How Western civilization felt about itself at that time. I mean, honestly, I say at that time, but literally nothing's changed, obviously. How Western culture was feeling about itself at the time. That was also the explosion of Eastern stuff onto the scene. It's really interesting because that's something else I can say for sure that people underestimate is it was really difficult to get access to. Wow, that was awesome. It was really difficult to get access to. Yeah, look, see, I laid the paint down perfect, and you saw how dark it was when I first put it down. But the dark colors dry lighter, and the light colors dry darker. And I didn't really calibrate it enough, so that line's gonna not really dry dark enough. But it's okay. That's why we do it live, so I have excuses for making mistakes. Anyway, yeah, it's something people really underestimate is how hard it was to get access to Eastern spiritual materials before a certain time in Western culture. The guy, like someone had to go and get the Buddhist texts and translate them. And it actually even took a while for them to figure out that all these cultures that we're talking about, Gautama and Siddhartha, and had all different names for the Buddha, we're all talking about the same guy. Like that's something Western culture had to figure out. And then they had to get the books and translate them. So like even pretty late in the game, if you look at someone like Alan Watts, he was a pretty big guy and a lot of what I would call that spiritual confusion. Some people would say it's spiritual wisdom, whatever. Even he, so I'm going to paint in the mouth right now. I feel like I'm on kind of a roll. I'm talking about like confusion and stuff. So I'm just going to paint in this mouth right here. I have to decide if I'm going to lay it in this dark color. Yeah, I'm going to make it the dark earth color. And I'm going to mix in a little bit more alizarin crimson, actually. Actually, I'm going to mix in a little, I could mix in a little more alizarin crimson and try and darken it up that way. Or what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop in a little indigo. I'm going to drop in a little of this blue color into here to get the color of his mouth. So even someone like Alan Watts, who made his whole career talking about Buddhism and Hinduism and all this stuff. I mean, when I've listened to, I used to be really into him. I've listened to a ton of his stuff, and I don't really think he knew that much about Tibetan Buddhism. Not because he was dumb, just because they didn't have the books around. People didn't know about it. And I was, how should I say this? I was friends with a guy, put it that way. I was friends with a guy that was very into the academic study of Tibetan Buddhism, and we talked about it a lot. And he would show me this stuff and be like, look, this was written 10 years ago, and now everyone in the field is like, yeah, this guy had no idea what he was talking about. Or maybe like, if you go into the first book about this topic, X, Y, and Z, and all different forms of Buddhism, not just Tibetan Buddhism, they'll just throw away material from the past and be like, yeah, wow, this guy had no idea what he was talking about. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because when you look at the 60s and the 70s, it's really easy to underestimate the fact that all the Eastern mystical stuff, which, by the way, I'm not saying it's all trash. I'm not saying like it's like poison, like in and of itself or something. But that really had just come on the scene. You can go back into all those traditions and find the first guy to bring it over. There was a first guy who brought over the first Zen Buddhist stuff. I'm pretty sure it was this guy named D.T. Suzuki, actually. There's a guy who brought over the Bhagavad Gita and started bringing over Hindu stuff. So you really can't underestimate that effect at all. It had just exploded onto the scene, and people were seeing it for the first time. The Zen stuff really took off. The Hindu stuff really took off. And like I said, I'm not even really like, it's not like I'm like, oh, like why were these people confused? Well, it's because like someone brought Buddhist books over. It's not what I'm saying. But it's more that they were first getting exposed to these ideas. So I'm going to make this mouth really big so I can put stuff in here. They were first getting exposed to like certain ideas, and also those ideas hadn't been put into like a bigger context. Also, even now it's difficult for Western people, I feel like, to get an accurate view of any of those like religions and stuff like that. Like sometimes when I go off the cuff about like Hinduism, I often have to qualify and be like, I'm not talking about people studying the Vedas. I'm not talking about someone learning Sanskrit and spending 12 years of their life studying the Vedas. I'm talking about like a white girl going to like yoga class and hearing a Tibetan singing bowl and buying a Ganesh poster. You know what I mean? So that effect had just really started. In fact, the guy who I was mentioning, I'm pretty sure it's the guy who first brought Zen Buddhism over. His name's D.T. Suzuki. It's actually kind of cool because in Zen Buddhism there's a rule that if you bring Buddhism, they would say Buddhism is that form of Buddhism, to a country, you first have to ask the country's leader. And he actually met with, I think it was Eisenhower. I forget who it was exactly. It might have not been the 50s. I don't remember exactly when it was. But he met with the president at the time and asked his permission to start teaching Zen in America. And the president said yes, obviously. But also it's kind of like a cute story. Imagine this like tiny Japanese dude like rolling up in the White House Oval Office asking if he can first teach Zen here. So yeah, that's a big factor, is that all that stuff had exploded on the scene. I could go on about that because it's something I studied a lot. I'm trying to think, should I make the mouth wider? I think I'm just going to leave it. We're going to go, not cartoon, but almost like medieval form right now. So that was a really, really big factor. And I think that even more than like the actual information itself, like I could talk about those like informational systems like Zen Buddhism and Hinduism. And obviously I'm not purporting to be an expert in all that stuff, but I can talk about how you experience them if you're someone from Western culture like me who gets exposed to them. That's what I can talk about. Where was I going with that? I'm trying not to say the F-bomb on the stream. I was going to say that, even more so than the actual like strict information contained in those things, it's more so this feeling. It's like, if you think about the spiritual progression of the West from 1900 to now, it's really characterized by feeling. It's characterized by a zeitgeist, like a mini zeitgeist. It's this feeling of, it's a few different things. Part of it is, oh wow, we can like finally piece all this stuff together. We can finally make sense of, X, Y, and Z because we're finally getting, the real, we're finally getting the real ancient wisdom. We're finally getting the real exposure to all these ideas. And I think that imparts this like very emotional, almost like a fervor. It imparts like a fervor onto people. And I'm going to turn the page of the painting thing over here because now this palette is full. And it's intoxicating. It's intoxicating, this feeling that, there's this ancient secret, and finally we're going to figure it out. And also, like, World War II just happened. People were finally just getting, like, fed up with, like, industrialism. Not fully, but, there's certain people in the 60s and 70s that really were not into industrial revolution and its consequences. And I think part of that also was a little bit of, I would describe it as confusion. Now I'm being subjective. About what the causes for that war. I'm sure it was really easy to be like, oh look, our culture's like really fucked up, and obviously Christianity has a part in that. So why shouldn't we look at all these other systems? And why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they investigate Hinduism and Buddhism and all that stuff? You shouldn't just take someone else's word for it. You should look at it. But I feel like that did play a large part in the spiritual confusion there. I'm gonna throw in a planet up over here. We kind of got a little weird like space thing going on, so I'm gonna throw in a planet up here. And also psychedelics. I could talk about that more, but psychedelics plus that, plus the fact that World War II just happened and everyone thought it was really shitty and kind of roped it into conclusions about our culture at large. And, there's a million factors. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, that could be like a whole 9-hour stream. Like why I think, my opinions about the spiritual progression of the West. Actually, that's kind of like what I talk about mostly. Speaking of all that, though, and then, so just to wrap it up so it wasn't like I was just rambling, it's really interesting because people look at that. So like you asked me like, the 60s and 70s, like why was it like that? But you can see that, and then you can trace it back further. Like in my opinion, those things have very clear intellectual roots in things like Western occult at the start of the 1900s, things like Carl Jung. It has roots in these ideas that go back just a little bit further than the hippies and, the 60s and 70s. And that's where it gets really interesting when you're like, like this new age, like I would call it new ageism. Let's just call it new ageism. That's like the hippie religion, has these like very direct roots into older things. The idea of like, there's this new age coming and everything's going to be totally different. And we're unlocking this, we're just now opening up the potential of humanity, and we're all going to be these spirit beings that walk into the new Aquarian age, and it's a new era. Like, haven't you heard? It's a new era, new spiritual laws, no more rules, no more spiritual rules, actually. Like, it all comes from these very tangible places. It's really, really not a coincidence, for example, that you have Aleister Crowley talking about what was it called? The Age of Horus. The Age of Horus. Aleister Crowley's whole thing is that there's a new age, that it's a new age now that we had. So perfect, I'm painting a big Saturn into the sky while I'm talking about Aleister Crowley's worldview right now. It's just like sometimes the aesthetic comes together perfectly. Aleister Crowley's whole thing, and it's really interesting because sometimes I would talk to normies about this model of understanding the spiritual progression of man, and like sometimes you can see them be like, yo, wow, that's crazy, that makes so much sense. I don't subscribe to this, but they respond that way because it's like a unknown underpinning of the kind of folk spirituality I described before that you would map out like this. It's kind of like an underpinning of that. Actually, this whole thing, if you've been watching the stream the whole time, this whole mapping out of like Western occult and underground spiritualities, which dovetails with New Age and magic and all that stuff, it's really like an hourglass. It isn't just like a mess like this. It's an hourglass. And where that nexus meets, where the hourglass tapers together perfectly, that's really Aleister Crowley and the Golden Dawn. It's all like filtered through them. So it's not like they made everything or came up with everything, but they almost like systematized it. And if you're going to get anything on the other side of the hourglass, it tapers through them, if that makes sense. Anyway, Aleister Crowley's whole thing was that this was a new age. I don't know if he would have used that term. He really called it a new aeon. And that humanity went through these different stages. There was the stage of, I guess, I don't know if I'm going to get the terminology exactly right, so you can look into it yourself, but I'll definitely get the idea right. There was the age of Isis. There's the age of the mother goddess. And that's when you get like ancient cultures worshiping, earth deities and Venus of Willendorf, like fat, dirt, fertile earth goddess times, like way back in the day. And then you get the age of Osiris, which is the age of the sun god, the god, like man, like the father. So you have mother god, then you have the father, and that's when it switches. And instead of, I'm giving you his view. I'm not going to say every second that I don't necessarily think this, but I'm just giving you the pitch. And that's when you get things like, instead of seeing the earth, like, oh, the earth gives life, so we have these mother goddesses. That's when it changes over to, well, yeah, the earth gives life and stuff. That's true, but it does that because of the fertilizing power of the sun. So actually, the earth is kind of like the canvas onto which the sun emits this like life-giving power. And he would say that that's when you get these powerful solar gods like Osiris and Ra and the Egyptian gods and most powerful male gods. You have like an era where the fecund, fat earth goddess mother thing is over, and then you get the powerful male sun god. And then we had that time period for a really long time. He would even put, Jesus and Christianity into there. I wouldn't necessarily do that, just saying. And then he said, now it's a new era. Now it's the era of Horus. Horus is the child of Isis and Osiris. So now it's like the era of the child god, and it's a new era where there's new spiritual laws. We're going to have a new individuated consciousness. It's just it's a whole completely new ball game that's just as much of a new ball game as when we switch from earth mother goddesses to solar gods and stuff. So the whole point of that little rant was that Aleister Crowley is new age. It's not a fucking coincidence that you get this guy saying like, hey, it's a new era with new laws. And he literally thought he was going to be the one to like usher in this new era. And then 50 years later, you get all these hippies being like, yeah, it's a new age. Like, we're going to go into the age of Aquarius. Like, everything is different now. It's not a coincidence. Those ideas come from like a very specific place. And once you start tracing back, oh, I almost got cadmium paint on my wrist, but I didn't. And once you start tracing those ideas back, that's when it gets really interesting, because honestly, I don't really know if most people, I don't want to sound pretentious and be like, most people don't know that. Oh, I ran out of gloves. Look at that. But good thing, I have way more. Oh, it's a blue glove. Well, let's see how it looks on the stream. That's when it gets really interesting, because yeah, I don't know if most people get that like those ideas didn't just materialize out of nowhere. Boom, new color. Is it more medical or less medical? I can't tell, honestly. That those ideas didn't just come out of nowhere, that they came from somewhere in particular. And then when you start talking about the connection between like Aleister Crowley and like the hippies, then you're in some space where most people aren't going to know like what the hell you're talking about, honestly. Okay, I'm throwing in some stars. I'm throwing them in right now. That was a really good question. Those are two good questions back to back. I should be able to give people a flair, like, you're a good question asker. There you go. Okay, but now I just got to focus for a second on what I'm going to put in here. I'm going to do this middle part last. I'm going to put in some teeth on this guy down here. Oh, I could use this. I have this light yellow. I could get like some yellowy teeth in. Like he's like kind of like unideal. Like he's kind of like dirty and like messed up. Let's do that. Blew my mind when actually I'm gonna scroll back a little bit and just see if other people asked questions that are kind of in that vein. Can you go off on Zen Buddhism, please? All right. Someone told me this is good advice, that sometimes when I'm looking at the chat, it's kind of like dead air. Because like for me, I'm reading it and thinking about it. But for you guys, I'm just, all you see is me being like, which is not very entertaining. So I'm just gonna quickly go off whatever questions I see. Zen Buddhism, that's an interesting one, man. Yeah, I could talk about that. I might have mentioned this on another stream, but I don't really talk about Buddhism too much on Twitter for a variety of reasons. One is that everything feels very like combative on Twitter, and there are people who like really study Buddhism, like who I respect. So, you know, I don't want it to come across as me being like, guess what? I know everything, and if you like Buddhism, you're just stupid. Especially with theological stuff, it kind of always has that like dunking feeling, which I really don't want to put forth. Also, the real reason I don't mind having strong opinions, obviously. It's part of what I do. The real reason is that what Buddhism is such a difficult thing to pin down that I really only like talking about it verbally, you know, like this with people instead of like in the punchy format of like social media. Because if you ask, like someone, I talked to a friend who was kind of like a scholar who was even like, yeah, Buddhism doesn't exist. There's not one thing called Buddhism. It's just like a huge umbrella term for these things that, you know, sometimes don't even have anything in common. I don't know if I would take it that far, but that has some truth to it in my opinion, because you have so many different forms of Buddhism that if you're just talking about it off the cuff, it's really easy for someone to come along and make it look like you have no idea what you're talking about to other people that don't know about Buddhism. So like, for example, even just a really simple question, you know, like part of the point of Buddhism, maybe the point you could say, and that's the other thing. If I'm talking about Buddhism, I have to qualify it like, well, you could say, or like some people would say. So I might not do that too much here, but just saying. The point of Buddhism, part of the point according to some people, I'm not going to give every statement that caveat, but you can see how exhausting it is to get nirvana, is to have nirvana, is to access this state called nirvana. Okay, what's nirvana? If you ask 10 Buddhist teachers, you could get straight up 10 radically different answers. Like, imagine the difference between like the main denominations of Christianity, you know, but then multiply it like times 1,000,000. And that's the spectrum of answers you can get in Buddhism. So if I'm posting about it and I say, yeah, you know, I happen to off the cuff be like, yeah, nirvana, like that's X, Y, and Z, it's really easy for someone to come along and say, wow, look, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Like, look, here's what the Dalai Lama said nirvana is. So this guy's like fucking stupid and has no idea what he's talking about. Or, you know, oh, here's what the Zen teacher said nirvana is. Like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And then if someone doesn't know about the differences between like different forms of Buddhism, it's easier for them to be like, oh yeah, I guess this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I'm getting these like nice like primal teeth in here. I'm really liking how this is coming out. Kind of venting some of my like more primal emotions subconsciously right now. Anyway, part of the window I can give into that is to give people an idea of like the different forms of Buddhism. I like to make an analogy to Christianity, and it would kind of be like, let's say at some point in Christianity that someone was like, hey, you know what? So yeah, Jesus came and Jesus was like God and stuff, right? But he's not the only Christ. There's actually been an innumerable number. Like God comes to earth all the time. And in different aeons, in different worlds, different times, there's been like innumerable numbers of Jesuses. And there's millions of Jesuses all throughout the universe, actually. And then people were like, okay, yeah, let's do that and make that a form of Christianity. That happened in Buddhism, straight up. That's what Mahayana Buddhism is, partially. It's part of what Mahayana Buddhism is. As Buddhism developed, it's almost like it got these like huge expansion packs, but actually a more respectful and a more accurate way of saying it would be that people elaborated on it and got deeper and deeper and deeper and built out the philosophical system more and more and more and more, and then people that are further down in the stages would look at people in the later stages and be like, yo, what are you talking about? That's not Buddhism at all. So you get like a million different answers for things. Okay, I'm going to paint in, honestly, I want to paint in a guy. I want to paint in a person, like laying down in this guy's mouth. It's kind of like how I've been feeling recently, so I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to do it in the same color. I'm going to do it in white, but I need a little bit more white. Maybe I'll make him a little yellow. So yeah, that's a big caveat for like, it's really hard to talk about Buddhism, but you asked me specifically about Zen Buddhism. Well, when I was into Buddhism, I was the most into Tibetan Buddhism, so it's not like I've studied Zen Buddhism with like a teacher and stuff like that. I did read a lot about it, but that'll only take you so far. I did some like Zen meditating stuff, but it's nothing like, you know, going and doing it like as a discipline, like with a teacher. I think it's really interesting. The main things that I took away from it were things that were purely like there's one Zen teacher I really like. His name's Shunryu Suzuki. And you should check it out. There's one video of him online. There's like one video of him that exists. And it's awesome. It's really awesome. And if you watch a video of him and then you read one of his books, you'll read it in his voice, which is extremely powerful. He's like this super tiny Japanese guy. His name's Shunryu Suzuki. And he wrote a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's secular, but it's not really hooked into, that's how I'll say it. It's not really hooked into Buddhist cosmology really as a whole. So it's like you could read it and get something out of it no matter what your religious background was. But for that reason, other people that are really into Zen don't like him because, I mean, obviously you could see why. So some of the stuff like that, like Shunryu Suzuki, I'm just putting in this like very basic figure down here. Put some little hands like that. Yeah, there we go. Are just about like noticing your mind, and he has meditations like he calls it zazen, like a just sitting meditation, where you're just sitting and observing your mind. You're just sitting there and thinking about how your mind works, and noticing how your mind works, and noticing how thoughts come in and out of your mind. And I mean, that's awesome, actually. I think it's really valuable to do those kind of like cognitive exercises, just to sit there and like see thoughts come in and see thoughts go. And like, that's kind of how you learn about the nature of thoughts in some ways. I learned a lot about how my brain works and different thought patterns and stuff like that from that. But like I said, that's not really hooked into like a larger cosmology of Buddhism and trying to like become enlightened and stuff like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. This guy looks kind of like super jacked that I painted in down here. He's kind of like super buff, man. I'm just going to come in here really quick. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Zen Buddhism's cool. I disagree. The thing is, I'm not Buddhist, so that means that I don't subscribe to the Buddhist cosmology. I guess it would be more easy for me to talk about that. I'm going to kind of fatten this guy's legs up so it doesn't look like so buff. He looks like really super buff. I was going for like primitive, almost like caveman stick figure, but instead it just looks like he's super muscly. That's pretty good. I like that, actually. I like that. But his head is too... his head's too far down, so I should put something up here. I could put like a halo, but then it's like an angel in this devil's mouth, and that's not really... It's not really the move. So I might just leave it. I really feel like I should get something up there. I could put another bone in there. I'm going to do that. Outside of Zen Buddhism, I mean, yeah, outside of that manifestation of Zen Buddhism, I don't know. The really interesting thing for me is that it's based around, and this is just to caveat, I am not saying that like I can authoritatively speak on this. I'm just like a painter who's speaking off the cuff. A lot of it is about how like you already possess like Buddha nature and you're already kind of like enlightened anyway, and you're just like holding yourself back. So from that like theological posit, you get a lot of interesting stuff where it's all about like manifesting spontaneity and being spontaneous and accessing spontaneity in this really weird way. I think that's cool, but I mean, I'm not Buddhist, so I could talk about why I'm not Buddhist and stuff, but there are cool aspects of it. Okay, I do want to keep going on about that, but I got to make some decisions here. I got to not start wrapping it up, but we're going to start landing the plane. Damn, it's been an hour and 40 minutes. That's insane. Okay, I got to make a call about what I'm going to put in here. I think I'm going to put, I mean, honestly, I kind of want to put like a castle in here. I don't know. We got the space thing, we got the devil thing. Whatever I put in here is going to be like a deciding factor for what the vibe of the picture is. I'm just going to go for it. I'm not really going to think about it too much, honestly. I'm just going to go for it. If I'm going to put in a castle or something, do I want to put a castle? I don't know. I do that all the time. Let's do something a little bit different. I kind of want to put like a coily snake or something like that. A snake. I do snakes a lot, but it could be cool to get like this like coily snake. I used the swan before. I'm kind of going through my mental situation here and trying to decide. You know, actually, I will show this. I guess this is like second intermission real quick. I do have next to my desk a literal list of all these symbols that I want to incorporate into my art. And I basically just went through something called like a symbol dictionary and like a symbol encyclopedia and just took out all the things where I was like, yeah, that is an interesting vibe. I should kind of try and get something like that going. And sometimes when I don't know what to do, I look over here. I don't want to make it seem like I am just arbitrarily randomly picking things, but it's kind of a way of having like a little vocabulary like on deck. So I can look over, like right now I'm looking at it, and I can say, oh, like a well, yeah, that is kind of cool. I've been wanting to use like a well in my art like a little bit more, like a knife, or oh, like a money bag. Like I'm looking at all the things on here. Nothing's really jumping out too much to me, honestly, right now, though. I kind of want to put a tower in. I do that sometimes. A snail would be cool. I'm just going to go with like the tower castle thing. That's what my initial instinct was. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to make the base of the tower this Venetian red color again. All right, let's get this going. Okay, that was kind of a cop-out about Zen Buddhism. I mostly have like positive things to say about it because the things that I would disagree with about it would be just things about Buddhism in general, not specific to that particular system, if that makes sense. So, okay, I'm going to throw this in here. There's lots of really good stories. They have really good like stories in Zen Buddhism, like about teachers trying to like get something, out of the students and trying to like snap them. That's a big aspect of it, like snapping someone into it. They want to like snap them into this like realization that, they already have like what they're looking for mentally, basically. So I'm going to put in the base of this tower like this. There's a really funny one of my favorite ones. I don't know if I got this from Alan Watts or not. There's a really funny one where the teacher every day is like, he gets the students together and he's like, what is Buddha nature? And they give him these like academic answers. Like, oh, well, Buddha nature is it's the present in all beings, the desire to become liberated and to liberate others. And he's like, don't give me these book answers. Like, give me a real answer, like from your heart. Like, give me a real answer. Like, what is Buddha nature? And one of these students realizes that the teacher doesn't want like an academic answer. The teacher wants like a spontaneous, like off the cuff response. So he goes out in the garden and he gets a frog and he puts the frog in his sleeve, in his like monk robe. And he's sitting there with the frog in there, and the teacher comes up to him and asks him, what is Buddha nature? And the student opens his robe up and holds the frog up, and the frog leaps out at the teacher, and the teacher says, nah, too contrived, too academic. And I thought that was really funny. Okay, so I'm going to put in the top part of this tower right here. Okay, and actually it's a good tie-in. Okay, so I'm going to put in the rest of the tower. I have to decide if I'm going to make it gray or red. I think I am going to just go with the red thing. I try and not use, sometimes, if I'm doing this kind of like primitive color scheme situation, I try and not use like too many colors, you could say. I could get like more pigments on the board, but I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to make it just kind of this like darker brick color. It'll kind of be like the color of the outline over here, I guess. Maybe a little bit brighter than that. I guess since I said all that positive stuff about Zen Buddhism, I will say something negative. I feel like it's indicative of, I almost don't want to say this because I dislike when, I have certain theological systems that I like, and they all have caricatures, and someone could say, oh, well, dude, in Catholicism or like in Orthodoxy, like it's just like this. And then, of course, if you're listening to it, you're like, oh my God, you're oversimplifying so much. It's not like that at all. So I gave the caveats. I know it's not really like that, but there's an aspect of Zen Buddhism, I guess you could say, that I feel like is very based around like the void, like the emptiness, the void, you could say. The void is a really big thing in Buddhism. Emptiness, the inherent emptiness of phenomena and stuff like that. That's something you'll hear a lot if you do like any academic study of Buddhism. They'll talk about the emptiness of phenomena. And what they mean by that is not that they're like literally empty, that things are like, like a box is empty. It's not what they mean. What they mean is that things are empty of self-nature. Everything is interdependent. So things don't actually possess self-nature. So everything's just in this like kind of amorphous state of like becoming something else and transitioning and changing to something else. You have a seed, and then you plant the seed and it sprouts, it becomes grapes, and then the grapes turn into wine, and you drink the wine, and the wine becomes part of your blood, and then you're living, and then you die and spill your blood somewhere, and the blood becomes part of the soil and gets eaten by a worm, and now it's part of the worm, and then the bird eats the worm, and blah blah blah. Everything's like interconnected and always like in this state of like becoming something else. So what they would say is that things are empty of inherent existence, that things don't have an inherent self-nature there. And I feel like that's a big part of Zen Buddhism for me personally, is focusing on like that interdependence, and it kind of naturally leads to like the void, where everything's kind of just like floating in this void. And again, I'm not speaking authoritatively about the system. I'm talking about coming at it as a Westerner. Don't like clip this and be like, oh my god, Owen fucking thinks he knows about Zen Buddhism. Just saying. There's actually a story, so I don't think this is true, but it's interesting, just like in Christianity, where I like digging in and comparing what the different systems have to say about each other. I liked doing that for Eastern religions also. It's way more rare though in the West, because everyone likes to paint this picture that they all just like get along and like think each other is true, which is not true. And in some forms of Hinduism, really probably just in one form, I don't know where the story comes from, but maybe it's just one guy, said that Buddha was a demon who came to Earth to trick human beings into worshiping nothingness instead of the gods. That's very interesting. I don't think that's true necessarily. I don't necessarily think that's true. But I thought it was really interesting, this idea that like Buddha came to get people to worship nothingness. And I know that's not really how it is, but just the idea of like Buddha getting people to worship nothingness is something I could never really shake from my consciousness. It's something I could never really, once I got that image in there, I never really stopped thinking about it, and then you meet people who are going to meditate in these caves. And like when you get into it, I mean, again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going to meditate in a cave for a few years. I'm just saying that when you get into it, you meet people who are like, yeah, I just got back from doing this like, months and months of this meditation retreat in this like cave or something, and I'm going to go back, and I'm not even close to like getting to where I want to be and all this stuff. You kind of have to step back and be like, damn, this is really real. Like you're really like going hard on whatever you're going on, and you have to ask yourself like if that's really the way to go. Okay, here we go. Boom. See, this color is not, I don't know if it's not like transparent enough. I mean, if it's not opaque enough, or if it's too wet and I'm picking up the color underneath. But either way, I'm not really getting the situation I want for the roof on this tower. I might just lean into it and I might just let the dark color come through underneath, and then I'll figure it out afterwards. Anyway, I feel like for Westerners going into Buddhism, I really do feel like that is an aspect of it, this void and, things being illusory. Buddha even said himself, like when you see things in general, it's not literally what he said, but this is kind of the vibe, think of them as a bubble or a dream or something reflected on the surface of water. It's just an illusion, really. Like all these things that you're experiencing, they're really just like an illusion. And whether or not that's an oversimplification, I feel like that really is a big part of the vibe that you get when you dig into Buddhism as a Westerner. And I feel like that kind of articulates like part of why I think it, aside from like me thinking it's true or not, I like to tie everything together that I'm talking about, so I'm not just rambling. I think it kind of contributes to the kind of spiritual confusion in the West that someone was asking me about before. You're all the way here in the West, you're cut off from like the actual system itself, and you read a few books, you get into Buddhism, you find some teacher, and I feel like it kind of points your spiritual arrow. It points the arrow of your spiritual life in a very particular way that can be dangerous or detrimental. And in fact, even within the systems, within every system, it's like this. Even if you get into like Orthodox Christianity, they would say like, there's the hesychist, there's like the Jesus prayer, like Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, and you can get a prayer rope and start praying that. But some people would say, you shouldn't do that without spiritual guidance. You need like a spiritual father. You need like a priest, not to be there with you all the time, but just like to direct you, because, you're doing some real heavy duty, like spiritual work, and, it can be dangerous if you don't like know what you're doing. And putting aside which systems I think are true and which systems I think are false, I think that's like extra true for the Eastern systems. There's so much like easily misunderstood things and philosophical nuances that I think that's part of why in both the West and the East, theology was restricted to like the learning class. Theology wasn't something that every single person was supposed to do. And aside from people like being illiterate and people needing to be like beet farmers and stuff, I think part of the reason for that was when you're calibrating your worldview, you need to make these really subtle distinctions. And if you mess up, you can really lead yourself fully and totally astray. And I think a lot of people, you asked me about the 60s before, even now though, get like a little Buddhist philosophy in them, and they're like, oh yeah, like everything's an illusion. This is all just an illusion. Like, and it really is so convenient, and it lets them off the hook for so many things, and it appeals to certain aspects of their desires and stuff like that. And that's not an indictment of the system. That could be true for any system, but I see it a lot with Buddhism. And yeah, okay, so back to this picture. There's a long little walk for me to say a few things about Buddhism. So I'm putting in this night sky. I'm trying to start landing this plane right now. So I'm throwing in the rest of this night sky. I'm going to put a window in the tower, and I'm going to put some light like coming out of this window in the tower. When we started, if you've been here the whole time, I was kind of thinking about, darker aspects of viewing life, darker things happening. The whole picture kind of turned out kind of dark, maybe for that reason. And I want to put this window in the tower and put like some light like in the window. So like in the tower, it's like illuminated. The tower is a really awesome symbol because it's man-made. Humans made the tower. They make the tower. And it implies like safety. It implies being able to see far. It's a very strategic location, being inside of a tower. You're removed from the world a little bit. So it kind of fits like the darker theme of this picture that I was going for here, with like, the devil below and Saturn above, and you got this like realm of death all around, and then maybe there's some guy like up in this tower and kind of just getting like a vantage point, kind of considering everything from a new angle. I was thinking about that recently. I guess, whatever. If anyone's been watching this, you're pretty deep in the stream. I guess I'll just kind of going to talk for a minute while I wrap this up. But I was thinking about that recently because, not to be too personal, but, I think part of what's cool about, like, the whole macro social media, being anonymous online and talking about stuff personas, we kind of get to talk about stuff that people don't normally talk about. Just about life and, how things are going and stuff like that. And, okay, I'm going to drop in this lemon yellow mixed with white as my light color, but I need to make sure it's not see-through, so I'm going to mix a new little lump of it down here. And I was thinking about all that stuff recently, like what I was just talking about, like getting a new view and having like a safe place to think about things from. Because my dad, who does not watch this, maybe he will though eventually, I recently went to Florida, which I talked about, and I went there for my grandfather's funeral, and honestly, it wasn't really sad at all. I feel like whenever I say that, I'm like fishing for like, oh Owen, like I'm so sorry to hear, which of course people say, and like they mean it. That's polite, and like you're not a sociopath, so you naturally feel that way. But I always have to qualify it. It wasn't really sad. He was like super old and had, oh shit, I just rubbed the brush on the painting, but it's fine, and had like hardcore dementia. So honestly, I feel like a dick saying this, but it was kind of just like, yeah, you get to be 96, you have Alzheimer's, you die, can't really complain. I mean, he had a really great life. It was my dad's dad, and I think it was one of the first people in his life that like really died, which sounds weird because my dad's like way older, but yeah. And I really saw him like dealing with it, and I thought he had like a really hard time with it. And it was interesting because I'm really different from my dad in that I've always been like a super into mysticism and religion and philosophy person, and even when I was doing drugs a lot, I really did them in the capacity of like trying to be deep and like thinking about life and stuff. And my dad is just really, I don't really see him that way. Not that he's like dumb, he's like a really smart guy, but I don't think he we've never talked about like religion or spirituality or anything like that. So it's interesting like seeing him kind of like deal with his like own father's death. And I was kind of like, I wonder, like, we talked about it a little bit, but, I'm not as open with him as I should be, I guess. Not for any reason. He didn't do anything wrong, but it's how it is, I guess, when you're a son and you have a dad sometimes. And I was like, yeah, I wonder, like, how you're, like, dealing with this. We talked about it a little bit, but I was like, for me, all I think about are, like, metaphysical problems to, like, the detriment of my own actual real life. So, like, when bad things happen, it's kind of like... not that I have this like thing to fall back on, but maybe it is like that. I have this like framework, I guess you could say, at least for understanding them. And now that I identify with, now that I inhabit spiritually Christianity, it's a better way to say it. A really weird way to say it, sorry. is I have way more of a framework for dealing with like suffering, and I just think about suffering in this different way. And anyway, I was thinking about how he was dealing with it, and we talked about it a little bit. And then we got back, and, like, his best friend died. Like, right after we got back from the funeral for my grandpa. And I was like, damn, that sucks. And I'm not there either. I mean, I'm far away. Like, I moved, like, far away. I'm going to throw in some, like, yellow light down over here. I'm going to make it, like, really bright in there. Like, it's really, like, light against, like, all this darkness outside. It's kind of, like, very fitting with what I'm talking about. And, yeah, then that's what happened. Like right when he got back, his like best friend of like 10 years that he hangs out with all the time just like suddenly died. And I was like, fuck, that sucks. And I don't really have like any like, real conclusion about that, but it was just so interesting because I don't know, it just got me thinking about like worldviews and how people think about life and contextualize like the bad things that happen in their life. And like I said, my parents are both basically like kind of like normie atheists. I mean, they're not normies, but in terms of their spiritual framework, they're basically like just atheists, right? So it was just really interesting. And that also made it like kind of hard for me to like talk to him about it, because like for me, like when someone hits me with some shit like that, like if someone like, it's just an easy example, that looks dope. This looks dope with the light coming out of the window, but I really want it to be a contrast between the light inside and the light outside. So I'm going to try and outline it with some of this darker color here. I might even outline it with the indigo here. Like if I'm talking to someone else who's like, they don't even need to be Christian. Like at my grandfather's funeral, I had this woman come up to me who basically was like, yeah, I'm like a super new age hippie and, all this shit and, whatever. I was like, it's like, I get it. And you're like closer to my framework in a way anyway, and it made it a lot easier for me to talk about stuff like that with her versus someone who has like no spiritual framework. And I don't know, man, it's just really interesting how life is and how people deal with like problems and stuff. And I guess the other interesting thing, and I'm only talking about this because like I don't know, no one ever talked about this with me. I don't hear people talk about like being a young man who like lives in a certain way and then your worldview changes. So that's also part of why I want to just put it out there. Like I said, wow, perfect circle at the beginning of the stream. I feel like my life used to be in like, wow, if you're watching this whole thing, come on, am I not about to make the best connection back to right where I started like 2 hours ago? Oh, if you watch the whole thing, damn, that's such a good circle right now. I used to live this life that was like, well, I feel like how my dad still lives, where like, and I'm not like talking shit, I'm just saying like it's this how can I describe it? Like my wife did this Enneagram archetypes thing. I don't know if you guys know about the Enneagram. I'm not going to go into it too much, but you do this little thing and it gives you an archetype. And she did mine. And my archetype was the need to avoid pain. And I heard that and I was like, yeah, this is legit. That's 100% my archetype. And I just lived in this way where like, I don't know, when bad shit happened, I don't want to say it was like awkward, but I kind of didn't really know what to say. And like being, I don't want to talk about this too much. I'm going a little bit too much into my personal life, but a little experiment. Let's just see how it goes. Like I have this like medical thing and I'm not like dying or anything. It's not like, it's not like that. But it's just interesting. And I had this friend who has cancer when I traveled to Colorado. This is not going to be totally a downer, but it's just interesting. And what she was saying was like, yeah, like she can tell the difference when she talks to people. Like some people are not awkward about it. Like she'll be like, yeah, I have this thing, I have cancer, and they're not awkward about it. They're just like right there with her. They're like, wow, yeah, that's crazy. What do you say? But for some people, it's like kind of awkward. And even my sister, who has this like very minor like medical issue, she said the same thing. She was like, sometimes people, they don't know what to say. And it's okay to not know what to say, but like for some people, I feel like it's indicative of like a deeper worldview aspect where like you view like sadness and suffering as something that is to be avoided. And that used to be how I lived 100%. Like if something bad happened, my mentality was like, okay, this is bad and I just have to wait, and then eventually it'll go away, or I'll deal with it or something, and then eventually that'll be it. But like what else is there? And my wife, when we started dating, like she's not like that at all. Like she really enjoys like sad movies and like talking about sad stuff. And initially I just didn't get it. I was like, why the fuck would I ever watch a sad movie? Like, I'm not sad right now. Why would I be trying to be sad? Like, it's so confusing. But after, dealing with like a lot of stuff and like X, Y, and Z happening in my life and stuff, now I feel like I view it totally differently where like I get it. And like if I'm talking to someone, like when people used to tell me bad shit that happened to them, not that I was being like unsympathetic, but I would kind of just be like, wow, that sucks. And in like the back of my mind, I wouldn't be like, why are you telling me this? Like I'm not like a sociopath. But there was like that element where I'd be like, yeah, like what do you want me to say, man? But now it's like I understand more and I get that like just like relating to someone else and talking about it, like this is looking dope. This is looking so dope. I'm going to wrap this up really soon. This is awesome. I'm really happy with how it's turning out. Just like talking to someone about it is like a positive thing. And I'm kind of rambling. Not really. I'm getting to a point. But it's just interesting because now I'm watching my dad, who I feel like is in the mindset that I used to be of like not having a framework to deal with the negative aspects of life. And now I'm watching him, go through it, and I'm talking to him about it and stuff. But I don't know, man. It's just interesting. I don't have any like conclusions, and I'm like there for him and stuff. But it makes me think about other people in my life too. Everyone has people in their life, and bad stuff happens, and you see how they deal with it or how they don't deal with it, and it's just really interesting. For like the last like year, maybe more, like so many people in my life have like gotten sick, and it's just it's really interesting. So it's like where I started talking about, where like my life used to be gray, but now it's a mix of like good and bad. Can't really complain, I guess. All right. Wow. What I'm talking about perfectly fits in with this image. We got like the Scholar's Tower, this light like coming out of the tower over here. Got the underworld going on, scary world outside, safe world inside. I kind of want to put some like one or two things over here, and then I'm going to wrap this up. I'll take a few more like questions maybe. How long have I been going? It's been 2 hours. I feel like these naturally are 2.5 hour long streams. Like maybe that's just how it is, and I can't change it, but maybe that's just how it is. I'm just making sure people can hear me and stuff. All right, cool. Okay, people can hear me. Someone said funerals are important to go to, so what I'm saying makes sense. It's also funny, like when I'm talking like this, like I said, I used to do like public speaking. There's this feeling after you've been talking for like 40 minutes or so, and then like, whoa, and then you get off stage and you're like, yo, was anything I was just saying actually making sense at all? So I'm glad people are getting it. Anyway, I also kind of wanted to talk about that just because you can see obviously like when I'm making an image, like what's going on in like the background of my mind obviously affects like the image and what's going on. So not to be like super corny like middle school art teacher right now, but I am going to take it there. Like that's also part of why I encourage people to like make images, and especially the kind of painting that I do where things are like symbolic. I talked about this last time, but it's just another way of engaging with your thoughts and putting your thoughts on paper. Everyone knows that like journaling or writing about your feelings can change how you relate to them, but also using pictures and images, like what I was just talking about, how like, you got the guy up here in the tower and there's like light and there's this like scary world outside. It goes deeper than like verbal thoughts too. Like, you have like a deeper engagement with it. I'm obviously just like talking out loud so you can hear what I'm thinking. But even if I was doing this alone, it's a really, really good way. It's a really, really, really good way to just access other parts of your mind and work through things and think about life and stuff. I don't know if I like plowed through into like totally cheesy territory, but that's just how it is. All right, so glad I talked about that. That's kind of what's been going on, and I didn't talk about it just to like blog my life on this video, but it affects the images. It's accessing like a different part of the image framework in your mind. All right. Also, it fits with like theology and stuff. It fits. It's relevant. I could put 2 cypress trees in. I did that last time though. I'm trying to not do things I've done before. I could put like a live tree and a dead tree. That's pretty tight. Actually, I'm gonna do that. I'm just going to use this raw sienna color. It's almost like yellow ochre, but it's a little different. I'll take a few more questions because now I am approaching the wrapping it up like portion. So I'll take some more questions and then that'll be it. This one was definitely a success. I didn't know how it was going to go, but it's looking dope, man. It's looking dope. Ugh, I got a little paint on my glove, but I'm kind of just going to roll with it. I use this symbol a lot. I like to use like temporal symbols that imply like the passage of time. So I'm putting in this tree over here, and I'm going to put like dead and like falling leaves on it, and then on the other side I'm going to put a tree where that's not the case, where it's alive, and there's nice leaves. And by putting the dead one first and then the living one second, it kind of implies like rebirth and transitioning from like death to life. So if I put the living one first and then I put the dead one second, it's kind of a downer. It's like, yep, things die. No one needs to hear that, though. Everyone knows. All right, here we go. Cool. Have I ever battled depression? Oh, we're doing it. It's that kind of... I'm looking at the questions. Yeah, why not? We took it that far into, like, real life and people dying and stuff. We'll talk about that for a minute. It also really fits the picture. Yeah, man, I used to be really depressed back in the day. It's something that I used to talk about a lot more on Twitter. I actually... You know, it's interesting because, like, I don't know. I really actually feel like it's really, really important to talk about because normally, you know, we all inhabit a certain way of thinking. I'll put it that way. The biggest umbrella we're all under. Let's put it that way. If you're watching this stream right now, sometimes I think that we kind of overcorrect a little bit, and things that the people that we don't like are saying, we kind of just put it all in the trash. And that's, you know, a natural response, right? But it's not always like that. Sometimes, you know, people are rarely like 100% wrong. That's something I like saying. People are rarely 100% wrong. Usually people are like somewhere between 1% and 99% wrong, but it's pretty rare that you find someone where every single thing they say is like complete garbage. And we all meme and like joke about the idea of like guys like, you know, guys need to open up about their feelings. Guys need to express their feelings more. And, like, yeah, if a girl tells you that, you know, sometimes she's fishing for something to, like, you know, she's kind of, like, testing you sometimes. I do agree with that. But there is also a legitimate aspect to that where it's not really so much about guys, like, sharing their feelings. But, you know, sometimes guys hit me up on Twitter and they talk about, like, you know, I'm depressed. Like, I don't really know what to do about it, which is cool. Like, I love when people hit me up about that, honestly. It's, like, super real, which is tight. And I think that less so than like guys expressing their feelings, it's more that naturally as a guy, and especially a guy who identifies with like being traditional, masculinity is good, all these things, which is true, masculinity is good. You get this impression that you can take like an infinite amount of psychic damage, that if something is bothering you or you're in this like tough spot, I mean, it's not like physical, like if you're in like a really, really tough spot, well, no one's like stabbing you. You're not going to like bleed out to death. So you kind of get this feeling that like no matter what, you can like power through it. But sometimes it's not true. Sometimes, you know, your mind and your psyche intentionally used because it has a connotation of the soul as well as the mind, can't actually take an infinite amount of damage. If you're in like a really crazy situation and you're really just not happy and all that stuff. I mean, like I said, I think most guys in general, but I especially see it with young guys. I'm sure older guys are like this too. You have this feeling of like, well, yeah, it's not like physical damage. Like I can take this mental damage and I'll just like deal with it and it'll be like totally fine. And it's not true sometimes. Sometimes it's not true. Yeah, you asked me if I battled depression. Yeah, I did. I got really depressed and I really didn't notice it. And I let it get way worse than I should have. I don't know what I would have done because I honestly, I mean, I should have, I don't know. The whole therapy thing is kind of weird for me. I probably would have like gone to like a priest or something, but I don't know what I would have done. But yeah, I kind of like didn't really handle it the best. And I was definitely using drugs and alcohol to deal with it. And I think that guys, it's not like I have the answer, but I would like to see guys talking about that like a little bit more, especially because a big part of it, I don't want to go off on this too hard, but I've talked about it on Twitter too. You can look up my thread that I made about this picture of St. Anthony that I made once. But a lot of it had to do with like feeling rejected by my friends and people in general because, all of a sudden I had these ideas that were like really important to me. I'm not even talking about like the crazy shit. I'm not talking about like, 9/11 mass ritual shit. I'm just talking about like having principles and how you feel about life in general. And a lot of it had to do with problems that I know that people have when they are a fringe person in any way. If you have ideas that are atypical, whether it's conspiracy theories, whether it's about fucking politics, whether it's about anything, like there's no one listening to this. Oh man, look, I made a huge rookie mistake. It's okay though. I'm going to turn this upside down so I don't get my hand in the tree. There's no one listening to this right now that doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's absolutely impossible. And you feel really like rejected by people. And also like the way that the social like mechanism kind of operates is that it kind of gets people to laterally enforce this like ostracization. So I talk about this sometimes on Twitter too, but it's not like in China where like if you say the wrong thing, like the police are going to come to your house. Like the way our system works is like your friends and family and your cousin and your aunt that you've known since you were like 2 and your best friends all just are going to talk to you like you're a fucking like freak and like something's like really, really wrong with you because, you said the wrong thing about guns or a political issue or a cultural issue or like a historical event or anything, People can get like really merciless, especially if you like trigger their programming like the wrong way. And, we all joke about it and meme about it, but I know that a lot of young guys have a really difficult time with it. Even the most basic, like, biological creatures, even if you take, like, like an aphid, like the most basic, like, insects or whatever, they feel isolation and they feel rejection and stuff like that. So you really can't underestimate the effect that has on you when, you start saying, who is it? I think Plato said it or Aristotle said it. We love our friends and we love the truth, but where the two diverge, we have to choose the truth. We can't lie, right? You can't just live your life saying like, well, I know certain things are true, but I'm going to make them not true in my mind because they make other people uncomfortable. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, you're not going to be like blowing up your Thanksgiving dinner because you're refusing to like keep your like viewpoints in check. Like that's not what I'm saying. But anyway, I know a lot of guys wrestle with that. It's something I really rarely see people talk about. And honestly, like I don't like to like get in other people's shit, but I also see people like fronting and kind of like coping about it. Like I see people like, oh yeah, like that's not me, man. Like I don't care, like whatever, like, and it's like it does affect you. If you, even I'm not even talking about like the crazy like red pill stuff. If you know what I'm talking about. If you make it known that you're not falling in line, that's really what I'm trying to say. If you make it known that you're not falling in line, people around you will start to treat you differently, and that has a really fucking big effect on you. So yeah, I got really depressed. That was a really big part of it, and eventually I got through it. But yeah, I was super depressed for a while. Maybe you're asking me that because you have battled depression or something, but that was a really big like turning point in my life. I'd fallen out with Buddhism. I'd fallen out with like Western occult. I kind of had not much of a spiritual framework. I intuited that something was up with Christianity, but I hadn't really like made it happen yet. And yeah, I just got really depressed, and I was just like smoking weed all the time in my Brooklyn apartment. And I kind of like talking about it because in retrospect, I could have realized something was wrong. Like one time it was my birthday, and like all I wanted to do was just like sit on the couch and like smoke weed all day. Like literally that's actually what I did. Makes me sound like a loser, but I'm just being like overly real with you guys. And I could have like looked around and been like, this is like really not who I am and really not like what I'm about. Like I should probably do something about the fact that I feel this way. But I didn't, and yeah, I kind of just rolled with it for a while. And it's like Jordan Peterson says, like sometimes you have to just, he doesn't say this actually, he just uses the phrase about a brick wall, but you kind of want to make it so you don't have to run headlong into a brick wall. There's certain things that you can do with your mind and your life that will make it so that you don't need to run headlong into a brick wall. And some of us are fucking dumb. And some of us might need to do that. But if you have to do it, you kind of want to make it so you only have to do it once. And you really ideally want to not be running headfirst into brick walls. So yeah. Yeah, I think most people have. And to wrap that question up, I'd like to see more guys talking about it. Like I said, like I see people fronting about it, like, oh, I'm so fucking tough. Like, yeah, I don't give a shit. Like, whatever, man. And I'm like, yeah, cool. You're really fucking cool, bro. Good question, kind. That's a good question. I don't want to go too much on about it. I don't want to like ramble about my own life too much. Anyone want to ask me any other questions? I'm gonna start wrapping this up. I think I'm gonna paint in these leaves, put in a few more stars, and then we're gonna be done. I could talk about that more. I guess this is kind of like the dark stream. This is like the dark stream, talking about death, painting in devils and death moon stuff. So this is like the dark stream. It's kind of how it happens sometimes. I kind of knew that was gonna happen. I read a lot about like politics and sociology, so I really didn't want to talk about that. So I guess it was either dealing with hard parts of life or what I think about Karl Marx, and I thought that it would be more fun to talk about life. All right, no one's asking me questions. I'm just gonna... Yo, I see a dope question. What do I think about the Blessed Virgin Mary? I could not be more of a fan. Someone asked me on one of the last streams what I thought about the Divine Feminine, and I was like, yeah, it's called the Virgin Mary, dude. Check it out anytime. Yeah, dude, I love Virgin Mary so much, dude. Even before I was really Christian, that was like she's like a person that I really related to. I remember just like the idea of like her and images of her and stuff. Those have always been some of my favorite images. So yeah, not really sure what else to say there. For that reason, I looked into, the Virgin Mary visions a lot and stuff like that, and I'm a person that's very into like visionary and mystical phenomenon. That's something I really liked when I checked out Orthodoxy too. You walk in the church and there's like a huge painting of Virgin Mary right behind the altar. I think that's really awesome. That's probably where I differ with, that's one space where I differ with the Protestants a lot. Like, when they start going off about like, oh my God, you guys worship Virgin Mary. I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, pick a different battle. You're not gonna make any leeway with me there. Do you ever keep up with... So, I mean, yeah, I could go off about Virgin Mary, but basically it's just that I couldn't be more of a fan. I mean, that's really it. That's also why I have one graphic where, it's like, it's not a picture of Virgin Mary. It's like an allusion to her pictorial form. I haven't made an image yet where I'm like, okay, here's an image of the Virgin Mary, just because... I don't know, with the saints, I feel like it's a lot more like fair game. Like I could make a picture of like St. Augustine and like St. Sebastian and, St. Francis or whoever. I feel like it's very fair game kind of. But in terms of making a picture of the Virgin Mary, I don't know. Like when I do that, I want to make sure that I really want to make sure that it's up to the caliber that it should be. It's not really about the caliber because, any picture I make and put online, I mean, it's dope, obviously, because I made it. But, I just want to make sure that it's how it should be, you could say. I haven't done that yet. I'm going to put in a few more stars, and we might be done here. It's looking pretty fresh. Okay, I'll answer a few more questions. I think we're going to wrap this up. I think I'm about done. It's about at the 2.5 hour mark. If you're watching this, I really hope it's been cool for you, man. It's like a really, really cool part of my life that... people find what I do interesting and that I can potentially assist with spreading certain ideas and certain things to other people. So if you're watching this, that's really awesome. Do I ever keep up with politics in my private life? In a way. Oh, I think if you mean like privately, yeah. I mean, I find it so fascinating, dude. There's no way I could ever turn that off. Even like the Super Tuesday stuff, I was like joking about it. Like, oh, get it escape from it. But like, I'm definitely going to check the results when I get out of here. It's kind of a combination of like, well, I know like the deep state is real and like Illuminati shit is real. So like there is like the, well, it doesn't matter aspect of it, but also I really like seeing the way it's like a litmus test for how, bigger things are moving in society. Terrence McKenna, who I could do a whole stream talking about in the future, I guess, talked about like creatures made of information, and how you can see like a creature made of information emerging when you like study patterns. And that's how I feel when I look at election stuff. Like when I see like, oh, 20% Bernie, like 20% Biden, like it's just so fascinating to me, honestly, to see like the trends and how society is developing and changing. So yeah, I keep up with it for sure. I keep up with it for sure. Okay. I don't know. I really like how this picture I made fit in with everything I was talking about, like thinking about like the darker aspects of life and all that kind of stuff. I'm honestly just wondering if I'm done right now. I feel like I kind of am. I feel like it looks really dope. The only variable is I could put like a little something right here. I think I am. That's how I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to put a little something down here on the bottom, and then that's going to be it. So if you have anything else you want to ask me now, and then I'm going to wrap this up. What I'm going to put there is sometimes, I was talking about communicating between people. I was talking about me and my dad a little bit, and communicating ideas to people, and also about like, how sometimes these darker aspects of life, like the real shift that I've made over the last like X number of years is they kind of like have something to teach me now, I guess you could say. I engage with them in a totally different way. And when I think of all that stuff, like things having things to teach you and messages and communication, there's one symbol I like to use that I haven't used yet on the stream. And that is a little envelope. A little message for the viewer. I also like using this because it implies that there's a message in the picture, because it's literally a picture of a message. A little mysterious closed envelope. Okay. Do I see far left politics giving way to a new age religion cult soon? Yeah, it's interesting, man. That's kind of what I was trying not to talk about the whole time. Not that I begrudge you for asking me that, but maybe I'll talk about it on the next stream because I'm kind of wrapping this up, and there was like a nice like theme to how this was all going. But I've been thinking a lot about what makes someone left wing and what makes someone right wing. I have to let this envelope dry, so I have like just a second here before I wrap this up. I've been thinking a lot about that, man, and I really just come up with more questions than answers and what the overlap is. And, I don't know, man. I really, like, honestly, the more I've thought about it, the more I kind of gotten, like, confused about it. Like, at this point, I really don't even know, like, what makes someone left wing or right wing anymore. It's easy for me to see it in terms of, like, modern politics, like, SJWs versus, like, based Trump supporters. Like I could caricature it like that and it becomes like very easy. But then when it comes to things like economics and like capitalism and stuff, like I was posting about it before, but like, if you ask a bunch of left-wing people what makes someone right-wing, they'll say like, oh, supporting free markets. And the difference is economics. Left-wing people are all about like, socialism basically, and right-wing people are all about the free market. But then all the right-wing people on Twitter, dude, think the free market is stupid. So it's not that. And, everything you think of has like a hitch like that. So I know it's not really what you asked me, but I just want to throw it out there because I don't like posting about it on Twitter too much. I mean, I will eventually. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about what makes someone left wing and what makes someone right wing. Anyway, I guess I'll talk just a little bit more about the symbols. Someone asked me, perfect question. This is probably the last question I take. If the relative size of the symbols means anything. Yeah, for sure, man. That's a huge part of like the visual situation. Small things less important, big things more important. That goes all the way back to the first images people ever made, probably. Yes, this is perfect. Wow, I love how this came out. This is awesome. And I'm definitely done. Cool. All right, so that was a really good one, man. That was a really, really good one. I really like how that stream just went. Like I said, I'm trying to keep them shorter, but I feel like really naturally they end up being 2.5 hours. I thought they would only be an hour initially, so I don't know, my bad, whatever. But you could see that, an hour in, I had only done like just a teeny part of this, and I keep ending at 2.5 hours, so I think that's kind of just how it's going to be. So yeah, as for this one, I really, really, really like how this came out with the stream and me talking to you guys, because ideally what I want the stream to be is just me talking about my process as I'm making something in real time and what I'm thinking about behind the scenes, I guess you could say. This was a really perfect one because when I make an image like this, I actually don't really know what people would think if I just posted this and you just saw this, but you can see in the stream that I'm bringing all these ideas into every aspect of it. I'm not saying that like I'm so deep, like there's so many ideas in my art, but that is how I make images. I naturally think about, things going on in my life, or I think about a particular set of ideas and I channel them into the image. Even when I was just doing the beginning with like the black sky with the dark sky, and then naturally we got this kind of like underworld thing going on. I talked about like, some weird stuff going on and the darker aspects of life and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't need to repeat what you just watched if you just watched this whole thing, but I'm really, really, really happy with how that turned out. Actually, I think it went really, really well. And yeah, that was definitely the best one so far. I can't tell if I should take more questions. I feel like I just hit on such a good note, and it's almost, how long has it been? Yes, it's almost 2.5 hours, so that's perfect. So yeah, if you watch that, thanks, man. It's really awesome. I really hope people were into it. Like I said, like it's honestly, I guess I already got to like the 2 real points. So I'm not going to be like too real, but it's such a cool, awesome part of my life that I get to take, this thing that I've been doing for a long time, which is making pictures, and, hopefully bring like something positive to other people via that. I feel like we're all just so inundated with really toxic and like frankly satanic and evil images trying to like sell you stuff, and how we think relates to the images we see so much. Like, I don't know if people realize, but like aesthetics and visual culture, and it really ties directly into what you think as much as like the words that you're thinking, the things that you're seeing. And it's really just such like an honor in a way to like be able to participate in that in any way that's beyond like me just like making pictures in my bedroom. So yeah, if you watch this, that's really awesome. I hope you got something cool out of it. I definitely did. I really appreciate people, following me on Twitter and stuff. It's really awesome. I love hanging out with you guys online. It's really awesome. And yeah, that's basically it. Nice. We talked about some dark stuff, but I feel like we're ending on like a really good vibe. That's awesome. So yeah, if you watch all this and you're like, if it was cool, let me know. If there's something you think that maybe I didn't do well, I guess hit me up, but be nice because whatever, or don't, whatever. This is the first time I didn't use autofocus, so I hope the whole thing was in focus. I was keeping an eye on OBS over here. I think it was in focus. I think we'll probably leave it this way. There was no real need for me to like adjust the camera. And yeah, man, that's really it. Don't really have anything to say that now that we're wrapping it up. I hope you guys enjoy your night. Spring is in the air here. It's just starting to be spring, so maybe that's going on where you are too. And yeah, guys, thanks for checking it out, and have a good rest of your night. I will talk to you guys later.